We will hear the case. Item number 8, Rappahannock Wharf LLC 20-0920. That would be Mr. Woodward.
Yes, sir. Good morning again, everyone. Rappahannock Wharf LLC is requesting authorization to redevelop a deteriorated commercial wharf to include the removal of portions of a failed timber bulkhead, concrete slab, with installation of a 70-foot long quarry stone and rubble breakwater with associated sand fill and wetland plants to create a living shoreline. In addition, install 452 linear feet of timber replacement bulkhead, a 16-foot wide gravel boat ramp with flanking timber jetties, a 32-foot long timber wave screen, repair one 12-foot wide pier, replace 2 other piers at 8 feet wide, and installation of 205 linear feet of quarry stone riprap revetment to create a commercial marine construction facility base of operation on Town Creek at the end of Callis Road in Lancaster County. The project is protested by an adjacent property owner and another individual in the area. In addition, yesterday we received notice from council of the other adjacent property owner that they are now in opposition, and I believe that information made it to your books late in the day yesterday. Next slide, please. The project is located off of the Rappahannock River above the Norris Bridge as you go upriver and head into the Coratoman River. As you go up on the left-hand side, just above Millenbeck there, is a little creek called Town Creek. Next slide, please. This is the site itself. It's a seafood processing facility that was built back in around 1959 by Lewis Callis, a local waterman, and the site is known locally as Callis Wharf. The proposal is by Mr. Frankie Davis, who is the owner of Northern Neck Marine Construction, who does shoreline construction activities. The site was operated and maintained for many decades after construction, processing and handling seafood products. The facility had fallen into disuse and disrepair. Mr. Davis recently purchased the property from the local bank who had taken over the property. Mr. Davis again runs a commercial construction, waterfront construction company, plans to use it as his base of operation, as well as allowing continued use for seafood offloading and processing as had traditionally been done at the site. The original facility had a bulkhead around the entire perimeter, portions of which have severely deteriorated beyond the point of repair. The current proposal is to redo portions of the bulkhead to allow continued commercial wharf usage while removing other portions of the bulkhead and failed upland concrete pad to incorporate aspects of a living shoreline design. Staff had met with both Mr. Davis and his agent prior to submittal of the JPA, at which time I encouraged them to consider incorporating elements of living shoreline design where appropriate. Next slide, please. This is the overall plan view of the drawing. There's a lot going on. It's a little bit difficult to see all of the details on this particular drawing, but I will attempt to start where the arrow is, kind of on the southeast corner of the property and wrapping around up into Town Creek. Again, for reference, both adjacent property owners now have filed formal complaints opposition. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the southernmost, southeasternmost corner of the property. The property line you see down there in the very lower portion is between the Rappahannock Wharf parcel and the Mancuso and Vining property, who is the most recent opponent of the project. Here you can see where the old timber bulkhead is in black dashed line. That will be removed. The area behind the old bulkhead, which consists of a broken down concrete pad and lots of debris and rubble, will be removed. And this whole section, as you go from the southeast corner in a northerly direction up to the red boat ramp, will become a breakwater with beach and high marsh area, which meets the definition of living shoreline for structure, sand, fill, and plants. At that turning point, where you see 7, 8, and 9, that will be the location of a proposed boat ramp to access the deeper water in that location off of the property for the applicant's construction skiffs and whatnot to be launched. Right there where the arrow is, thank you, Mike, at point 9 begins the reconstruction of a timber replacement bulkhead going north to point 10 and then turning west or left around the point. That whole area will be new timber replacement bulkhead to with backfill to reestablish that area as an upland loading and commercial location for materials and whatnot. At site 10, you will see a proposed 32-foot wave screen, which was designed, my understanding, to prevent waves from running around the bulkhead and into what is essentially the boat basin area of the project. And so continuing on to the west, next slide, please. The pier you see to the furthest right is to be rebuilt, essentially repaired. It's about the only pier on the facility that's currently serviceable. The bulkhead will continue west from point 11 to point 12 and take a turn to point 13. It turns somewhat to the southwest. Again, all of that area will be new timber replacement bulkhead in front of the old failed bulkhead with backfill in behind the new bulkhead. 2 new piers will be installed in the general footprint of old failed structures in the same location. Next slide, please. And that is point 13 there is the transition from timber replacement bulkhead. And as we go west up into Town Creek, it will transition into a riprap revetment all the way to the end at point 17. Next slide. What we'll do now is go to the section view of those same aspects of the project. Again, starting here with section A and B, representing the proposed concrete rubble and quarry stone on top breakwater with proposed backfill, sand, clean sand fill, and plantings. All of the upland remnants of the bulkhead and failed concrete pad and debris and rubble will be removed. And this will be a living shoreline, if you will, area of breakwater, sand, beach on the southeasternmost corner adjacent to the APO's Mancuso and Vining. Next slide, please. This is sections C and D, where the bulkhead will be replaced. This would be to the north of the boat ramp. The boat ramp essentially is in between the breakwater and the beginnings of the timber replacement bulkhead. There's a series of old bulkheads that were built and rebuilt over the years. The elevation of the bulkhead will be raised somewhat with additional backfill, cleaning out all of the debris and associated former failed structures to get the upland back into an area that can be used for the applicant's construction facility. Next slide, please. Again, additional section views where the bulkhead's a little bit lower. This is section E and F as we've turned the corner and have gone more into north-facing shoreline inside Town Creek. Next slide, please. This is the boat ramp section in the top section view drawing, which shows how quickly the water drops off in this location. The boat ramp will be constructed over the existing substrate, and we'll have flanking timber jetties. They're more jetties than groins given their elevation, but these two structures flanking the boat ramp will be there to protect the ramp and ensure that it doesn't fill in with sediment, so it ensures its use without as much maintenance required, filling in from sand and whatnot from where the breakwater is to the south. And again, the timber wave screen is in the lowest part of the drawing, the lower part of the drawing. Continuous height structure, about 4 feet above the elevation of mean high water to break down wave energy as it comes in from the east off of the main stem of the Coratoman and would wrap around into Town Creek to protect the boat basin area where his barges and skiffs will be loading and taking care of unloading equipment. Next slide, please. This is the riprap that's proposed. This is actually above the mean low water line. It's already been approved by the local wetlands board, as have all of the other aspects of the intertidal impacts of the project. Those were approved at the Lancaster County Wetlands Board public hearing some time ago, but this will show you that the riprap will be tucked up right against the steep wooded vegetated bank, standard buried tow, filter cloth, so forth. And then the bottom picture is just a vicinity map. Now we're going to go to some, next slide, please. Now we're going to go to some ground shots. Oops, I'm sorry. The applicant's agent included planting notes you'll see on the far left, and the impact notes I've expanded a little bit so you can see the details, but essentially the project has a net gain of jurisdictional wetlands, both vegetated and non-vegetated, over what is currently at the site. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're standing on the beach owned by Mancuso and by Ms. Mancuso and Mr. Vining, looking at the remnants of the old timber bulkhead, which goes out shore perpendicular right along the property line, and then takes a turn to go to the north. I'm looking north. All of this is to be removed. The concrete pad that you see behind the bulkhead, removed. All of the debris and rubble materials to be removed. And this will be the area where the breakwater is to be installed just offshore of the old remnant bulkhead with clean sand backfill and wetland plantings at the appropriate elevations above and behind landward of the breakwater. Next slide, please. Standing on the property line, Mancuso property, Mancuso Vining to the right. The timber bulkhead return wall that you see going out to the east, I'm facing east here, all of that timber will be removed. All of the busted up concrete pad will be broken and removed from this area. The area will be graded and filled with sand and planted with appropriate wetland vegetation behind the breakwater. Next slide, please. Just an idea of what the existing upland, if you will, looks like now. The majority of the perimeter of the site is oyster shell fill, which is not uncommon how it was done back in the day at oyster houses, all that leftover shell that was shucked is pushed out along and filled and becomes upland that, you know, is actually probably filled on state bottom, but this was done back in the late 50s. But the concrete pad you see there will be broken up. The clean portions of it will be used as appropriate as core material under the armor quarrystone granite material of the breakwater. All of the creosote and other timber and debris will be removed and disposed of properly. Next slide, please. Now I am looking back toward where the breakwaters will be. If you note to the left of the old timber wall, there's some white PVC pipes. Those represent the footprint of the breakwater. So that area will actually be on subtidal bottom, the quarrystone and rubble material breakwater with the sand back in behind it. And then as you transition more to where I'm standing, all of this would be removed and the new ramp would be installed about where I'm standing, I believe. Again, all the material to be removed. You can get an idea how quickly the water depth drops off to the left there. It's relatively clear water that day. Next slide, please. Now I've basically just turned 180 degrees, looking up toward the corner where the bulkhead makes a turn and goes west. Again, the new bulkhead will be installed channelward of the old remnant bulkhead. The materials will be removed and the old creosote materials will be removed and backfilled with clean material. The timber wave screen will come off about where that tall PVC pipe is and go about 90 degrees to the right, which will be the proposed wave screen. Next slide, please. Now again, facing east, this is the return or the turn in the bulkhead. All of this will be inappropriate, old, deteriorated material will be removed. The new bulkhead will be installed outboard of the old timber bulkhead and brought up to grade and filled. Next slide, please. Now I'm actually standing on a barge owned by the contractor that's tied up to the existing usable wharf. Just looking back again at that area, the corner where the turn is, about where, beyond where that pile of quarrystone is would be where the ramp is proposed, and to the right of that quarrystone would be the breakwater. You can see the north off in the distance. Next slide, please. Now I'm back on the upland. This timber breakwater, there will be a new, bulkhead. There will be a new bulkhead installed outboard of the existing. The area filled with clean material, brought back up to grade. This day I was there, I happened to catch a local waterman unloading his crabs to the truck up there in the parking lot. In the distance, you can see the timber wharf that is still somewhat functional, and then the piers beyond that, you'll see in another photo. But again, this area will be new replacement bulkhead and backfilled. Next slide, please. Again, the somewhat serviceable old pier will be repaired, replaced as necessary here. The bulkhead would continue off to the left, to the west. The pilings that you see offshore are the remnants of the old piers and mooring piles. All of that's to come out, and there will be new piers installed in the footprint of the old. While I've got this slide, the house you see to the left, I believe, is the Morazes, if I'm pronouncing it properly. And the house you see more to the right is Mr. Emery, who represents Town Creek LLC, both of whom are in opposition to the project. Next slide, please. Now I'm looking back north again. These are the remnants of the old piers and mooring piles, all to be removed. This will be the transition. This area will be bulkhead to the corner, and Mr. Emery's chiming in here. This area again will be the bulkhead and backfill. Next slide, please. This area will be bulkhead to where you get, I'm sorry, this area will be riprap where it makes a turn and goes up into the cove. You'll see a white PVC pipe in the distance there under the tree canopy. This is all going to be transitioned into riprap. Next slide, please. This is the Lancaster County GIS tax map. A represents the parcel owned by Mr. Davis. The P's represent the protestants, as well as 2684, which was the protest that came in yesterday from the Mancuso Vining owners. Next slide, please. This is actually our aerial photograph with the amber, orangish, brownish color representing the lease held by Mike Callis, the son of Lewis Callis, who built Callis's Wharf. You can see that the lease comes right up to the shoreline, and all of the improvements channelward of low water will therefore be located on Mr. Callis's leased ground. He does not object to that. He has signed off on it. He does have a note that he would prefer, or he believes it would be better served to just re-bulkhead the entire parcel, as was done by his father. It would offer more protection for Mr. Davis and his business, but he does not object to the physical encroachment onto his oyster lease resulting from the proposal. Next slide, please. Again, that's that same photo with the oyster ground turned off. You can see back in the day it was used for any number of commercial watermen landing their catch, processing catch, shipping catch off-site. Next slide, please. This photo is actually, I believe, submitted by Mr. Emery, and I'm sure he'll tell me if I'm wrong. A more recent aerial photograph showing the parcel, the subject parcel, just gives you a different perspective. Next slide, please. I actually got this photograph and the following photograph from Mr. Mike Callis, the son of the gentleman who built the facility. This was prior to the construction of the second story on the Shuckin House. You see there kind of on the center of the peninsula, circa 1959. Mr. Callis wanted to bring this to my attention. You will see offshore to the top of the photograph the remnants of an island, what's left of an island, which was, before it was an island, was a sand spit, and now it's completely gone, which allows for more exposure to the south and east, coming upriver, up the Coratoman, which can lead to some heavy wave action on that corner of the property. Next slide, please. Again, a somewhat more recent photo than the last one, high altitude aerial photograph of Callis's Wharf back in the day, 1965. You can see all the vessels tied up. They're kind of sistered up to each other along that area. Next slide, please. This was a photograph of a print by John Barber that was shared with me both by Mr. Callis. This particular version of it was shared by Mr. Emery, which gives you a kind of a feel for Town Creek back in its heyday with all of the commercial boats coming and going and loading, unloading, and so forth. I'm not going to read all of the details there. That, again, this was provided by Mr. Emery, this particular one, and he may want to speak more to it when he chimes in, I would imagine. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll just leave that there and go into the remainder of my evaluation. Some of this may be redundant because I tend to talk over myself when I use the photographs. The project is protested by both Mr. and Mrs. Bob and Karen Marazis, who own 2 contiguous lots, one of which is adjacent to the Calais Wharf, and Mr. Bill Emery, representing Town Creek LLP. And again, we received a protest late yesterday from an attorney for Ms. Mancuso and Mr. Vining, and that should be available in your packet. It was added late. Hopefully you got a copy of that. The Marazis have lived next door for 10 years and indicate that there are inaccuracies in the application. There's a general lack of detail in the plans, and feel a vertical benchmark should be established to more accurately reflect the plans. Specifically, they believe the proposed beach that's being proposed behind the breakwater will attract unwanted visitors, that it won't survive in the event of a hurricane. They also believe the proposed ramp will attract unwanted visitors, and asked about gating the property after working hours to prevent unauthorized use. They question the design and effectiveness of the proposed wave screen and feel the proposed riprap in the cove area would be better left in a more natural condition once the existing debris is removed. Mr. Emery has submitted a total of 5 letters of opposition to date. He states that he has been on Town Creek at this location for 28 years, is the custodian of over 600 feet of shoreline in the county, and he questioned the accuracy of the original JPA submittal, including the dimensions of the original pier structures. He feels a living shoreline would be more appropriate on the western side of the property up in the cove, feels the wave screen is unnecessary, obtrusive, and will block passage of vessels, fish, and water into the cove. He is concerned about the boat ramp, that it may be for public use, and he feels the bulkhead on the north and northeast corner of the property should be taken back to the alignment of the original bulkhead built in 1957. Mr. Emery included information on the permitting history by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which predated VMRC authority, at least the habitat management in '62. And he also included general history of the site with accompanying photographs. The Mancuso and Vining letter indicates they have issues with the wave screen and the breakwater, especially right there adjacent to their property line, and believe it'll have detrimental impact and effect on their existing beach area. As I had mentioned, the creek adjacent to the wharf is under the commercial lease, oyster lease to Michael Callis. He does not object to the project, but he feels it would be better to redo the entire bulkhead, especially on the east-facing side, to better protect it from storms. He feels the proposed breakwater will be ineffective during hurricanes and heavy storms in the future. The Lancaster County Wetland Board approved the project, the portions of the project within their jurisdiction, within the intertidal zone, unanimously 5-0 at their August 13th, 2020 public hearing. Both Mr. Emery and Mr. Callis were in attendance and spoke during the public hearing on the proposal. The Lancaster County Board of Supervisors granted a special exception to expand the prior non-conforming use, working waterfront, since the previous owner had never had it zoned industrial or commercial, as it was constructed before zoning was established in the county in 1975. So they had to have a special exception as a prior non-conforming use. The Virginia Institute of Marine Science indicates the project, the proposed revetment on the western side of the property is actually more suitable than a living shoreline, given the steep, shady shoreline in this location, which would require extensive trimming and tree removal and removal of existing vegetated riparian buffer. They indicate that the revetment could continue to the east where boat mooring is not needed, in lieu of some of the replacement bulkhead. They further indicate that the concrete rubble should be removed from existing areas of wetland vegetation landward of the failed bulkhead on the northeast point, and that this area could be redesigned to be a sill that would transition into the breakwater more to the south to form a contiguous area of vegetated wetlands. They do not see the point of the wave screen and feel the boat ramp could be relocated to the northern shoreline. They further recommend that the oyster shell fill be removed and that the shell fill be removed and used for oyster reef restoration, as it is a valuable and scarce resource currently. The Virginia Department of Health, both environmental services and shellfish sanitation, have approved the project and indicate the project will not cause any change in shellfish condemnation in the area. Corps of Engineers, with input from NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, is currently reviewing the request for the Army Corps of Engineers permit. There are no beds of submerged aquatic vegetation in proximity to the project. In summary and recommendation, in light of the numerous comments raised during the public interest review by both neighbors and the agencies, the agent revised the plans and submitted them on August 7th, 2020. All of the plans I presented earlier in the slideshow are the revised plans, not the original plans. There were some minor detail changes. While some of the original details were in dispute, staff is comfortable that this project represents a reasonable and permissible use of state-owned bottomlands, especially in light of the site's long history as a waterfront commercial property. The applicant indicates he will allow its controlled use as seafood offload processing and shipping facility for other local watermen in the area, many of whom have been displaced as commercial shorelines are converted into private residential lots and other water-dependent, non-water-dependent private developments. The project is proposed to impact 1,095 square feet of vegetated wetlands, much of which is growing in areas that were once upland among the concrete rubble, oyster shell fill, and other debris behind the failed bulkhead structures. The proposal will result in a net gain of 1,370 square feet of new vegetated wetlands and 1,325 square feet of intertidal beach habitat landward of the proposed breakwater structure. This is in keeping with the Commonwealth's recent mandate to incorporate elements of living shoreline design into shoreline stabilization projects where possible. These wetland impacts were considered and approved by the local wetlands board at their August hearing. Since the site will continue to be a working waterfront, some impacts to wetlands and state bottom is to be expected. Staff believes the proposed improvements to the deteriorated commercial wharf will result in a cleaner, safer, and more usable shoreline for water-dependent activities that also incorporates a living shoreline design, albeit not the entire shoreline, into the project. We do recommend, however, that the failed bulkhead structure where the revetment and breakwater, breakwater is proposed to be removed, as well as any and all unclean material, metal, paint, concrete block, etc., be removed from the site and be disposed of in a lawful manner and location. Staff does not object to breaking up the clean concrete slab for use as base material, core material under the granite quarry stone armor material in both the breakwater and revetment portions of the design. We further recommend only clean sand fill with greater than 70% sand be used for beach nourishment and wetland planting areas on the eastern side of the project behind the breakwater. While relocating the ramp and wave screen was discussed, it appears that the applicant has justifiable reasons for their need and proposed locations. Many of the remaining concerns raised related to security and site access fall outside the purview of this commission. Accordingly, staff is recommending approval of the project as modified and shown in the revised drawings dated August of 2020 and represented in the plans I showed earlier. We further recommend the following conditions be made a part of the permit. Number one, all fill used for beach nourishment behind the proposed breakwater shall consist of 90% coarse grained sand. Number two, all construction debris removed from the site, metal, creosote timbers, etc., shall be disposed of in the upland in a lawful manner. Any concrete on site that is to be used as core material in the breakwater structure or riprap shall be free of exposed metal, any contaminants such as paint, tar, etc., and broken into smaller pieces in conformance with our best management practices concerning the use of such materials in shoreline stabilization. In this case, staff believes that the proposal should not require a royalty, since it would appear to qualify for the royalty exemption provided in section 28.2-1206 BII of the code for, quote, commercial facilities providing services relating to the shipping of domestic or foreign cargo, considering the applicant's written and verbal statements, signed statement that was submitted to the commission that the site will be used for, and I quote, the site will be used for the loading of and unloading of cargo and seafood, and their prior descriptions of their plans for the site, as well as the recent opinion by the Office of the Attorney General related to exemptions of this nature. That's a lot of material. I'd be happy to go back over any of the details, but in the interim, I stand ready to answer any questions or to try to answer any questions from the commission.
Okay, I'll tell you in light of the length of the presentation, which covered a lot of details, I've had a request by a member of the public for a break, and I think that is in order. What we'll do, we come back. Mr. Woodward can answer any questions first by members of the commission, then by members of the public that have interest. But we're going to break right now for 30 minutes, and we will get back in order at 12:45. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have 12:45 p.m. I'd like to reconvene the October 27, 2020 meeting of the Marine Resources Commission. When we concluded prior to break, Mr. Woodward had given his presentation pertaining to the project at hand. At this time, I'd like to ask if any commission members have any questions of Mr. Woodward on his presentation.
This is Christy Everett. I had a question, Commissioner Bowman.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Everett, proceed, please.
Great, thank you. Mr. Woodward, I was just looking at the VIM's comments, and there was a few in there that I wanted to touch base on, but I guess just overarching, I know you mentioned some of them in your staff review, but were VIM's comments kind of considered but decided they weren't suitable for the applicant, or just kind of wanted to get big picture before I jumped in on some of them specifically?
Well, as always, the VIM's comments are considered. We hesitate to redesign projects, for applicants. As far as like moving the boat ramp, it was expressed to me and on the record that they want the ramp where they want the ramp because that's where the deepest, steepest slope is for accessing, for launching. The wave screen, we didn't object to per se, but maybe VIMS could further elaborate on their comments, but yeah, they were certainly considered.
Ms. Everett?
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you. That's helpful context. I guess more specifically, and as you said, the boat ramp was specifically maybe put there or proposed as such for depth, but in the wave screen, I think we'll maybe find more information from the applicant. I guess just more specifically, Vim's comment to there's a concrete rubble that is kind of smothering some wetlands, and potentially take that landward, that bulkhead landward, to the northeast point, potentially have a sill and transition into the breakwater. Like you said, you don't want to necessarily redesign the whole project, but it seemed to me that there was some value there, and I just wanted to specifically ask about that recommendation, if I could.
And Tony can jump in, but when we discussed this at the staff meeting, we felt that the bulkhead where it was proposed to be replaced was reasonable, and to transition that area of the northern, I guess on the screen where the little wetland logo thing is, if that area were turned into a sill, I don't know that he would be able to get the elevation. I don't know that the applicant would be able to get the elevation and work area that he's proposing, because the sill wouldn't really protect it from high water situations coming out of the east. Again, I hesitate to speak for either Vim's or the applicant in that regard, but maybe they can elaborate.
Mr. Bowman, would you mind if I followed up last item for Mr. Woodward?
No, absolutely. Proceed, please.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and finally, and I would, if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner Bowman, hear from Vim's next, but one final question is just that 205 linear feet of riprap revetment. Just curious if it was determined by staff that it was indeed needed versus more of a living shoreline treatment as well. I know this is a complex project with a lot of different uses and scenarios, but I just did want to verify the necessity of it.
Well, first, the riprap revetment, again, it would be to the far west of this photograph, left-hand side, was approved by the Wetlands Board, duly approved during their hearing, and Emily can speak to this, but their report indicated that they didn't think that a living shoreline would be appropriate or work there because it faces north. It's at the base of a very steep bank with overhanging tree cover. You wouldn't get any sunlight to it. So I don't believe Vim's had an issue with the revetment along that. I guess it was section G in that area. Mike, would you mind going back to, if the commission doesn't mind, right there, thank you. Proposed 205 feet of riprap revetment. It's on the north-facing shoreline. You can see the agent, indicated that tree cover is there. We could go back to a ground shot as well, but I don't believe Vim's felt it appropriate, or I don't want to use their words, but I don't think they had an issue with it being a revetment versus a proper revetment.
Well, if I may interrupt, just to ensure that we know what we're doing at this juncture, and Mr. Woodward, not to dispute anything as far as your knowledge and experience is concerned, but when we have Vim's there and we're going to say what we think Vim's is going to say,
No,
yeah, we're good. I'd rather have Vim's. So Ms. Hind, can you please comment on Ms. Everett's inquiry and also the response provided by Mr. Woodward? I think I understand it, but you're Vim's and we want to hear it from you.
Certainly, Commissioner. This is Emily Hind from VIMS. In regards to that area, that's the proposed revetment, Jay did have our comments correct. That area is heavily wooded, as you can see a little bit in the photo that's currently on the screen. What you can't see too well is that the upland bank is fairly steep, And at the top of that bank, there is the corner of an existing building that the applicant may be able to provide more information on, but I believe was currently already being undermined a bit. This area does not have a lot of wave energy to it, so would be a candidate for a low energy living shoreline if there was adequate sunlight for those plants to survive. With the shoreline situation as it is, the bank would need to be heavily would need to be graded, and that would necessitate removing a lot of that vegetation, which in turn is likely providing some stability to the bank as it currently exists. As far as the other corner of the sort of the point of the shoreline that was discussed first, we offered comments to sort of increase the potential for that area to be more of a living shoreline area.
That answer your question, Ms. Everett?
Yes, I think so. And just to apologize, I do realize that VIMS hadn't wanted that western corner, but just that additional information is helpful. I guess, though, if I could just follow up with Ms. Hine about the suggestion to take that further east, was that discussed, or just kind of what happened to that recommendation? Did it fall flat? And maybe that's a question going back to Mr. Woodward, but it seems like it is viable, and I just didn't know why it wasn't pursued.
I'll refer you back to Jay Woodward for that. I was not part of the discussions with the applicant or the Wetlands Board on that aspect.
Mr. Woodward?
Yes, sir. Mike, would you mind ground shots going back around to that corner we're speaking of? That, one more maybe? If this is the area you're speaking of, there you go, that works. The water depth drops off pretty dramatically to the east of that easternmost failed structure, and it is my understanding that the applicant's desire is to use this upland area, this corner, and restore it to an upland area that can be used for his business. And to build a sill here, it's real deep to the east, unless you built the sill, right along the alignment of the failed structures. But a sill and a living shoreline here would obviously take away from what his plans were for the property and what the property was traditionally.
If I can at this point, Jay, I need to ask you a couple questions. I'm looking at the first paragraph, and it basically states that this is, the owner is Frankie Davis, owner of Northern Neck Marine Construction. And these aren't, I need the answer to these questions. Is that the name of the business that's currently there?
My understanding is the parcel was for sale for many, many years, and Frankie Davis runs Northern Neck Marine Construction, and he and his wife are now the owners of the parcel.
Okay. Is this, do you know whether this piece of property, how it's zoned? And that's going to sound really goofy because I know we don't deal with upland matters, but I want to get to a point. Do we know what the zoning is by chance?
Yes, sir. The property is currently, they have a special exception to allow it, and I'm going to try to bear with me for 1 second because I want to read you the actual verbiage from the county that says,
and Mike, you can go back to that overhead, the overhead of the piece of property, please.
The Davises were asking for a special exception to allow this to be used, because it is currently zoned R1. It's zoned R1 because zoning came in after this was a commercial facility back in 59. So it was,
Okay.
so they didn't zone it commercial. They gave it a special exception to allow it to be used as commercial waterfront for both his marine construction and to allow the continued use for seafood loading and offloading. And that's all in the minutes of the Board of Supervisors approval, which was back in July of last year, of 2019.
Okay. I guess what I'm having a hard time with is that, in all due respect to all of my colleagues, and we all know what the Code of Virginia says as far as living shorelines, as far as certain things are concerned. If this facility was given a special exception, if you look at the facility in its overall state, it's obvious of what this facility is and it's obvious what this facility was. I hearken back to whether we would ask if Newport News Shipbuilding or Kalana or one of the smaller yards was having a problem with a bulkhead that has gone in disrepair, and they had historically had an established boat yard, work yard, or something there. I think the balance must be, of course, environmentally, where we always want to make sure that we do the right thing, but also, what's the established purposes of this property? Are we going to be put in a position where we're going to try to convert this piece of what has long been commercial property that now has a commercial property exception into something that everybody seems to want? And just because, from what I've read in the protest letters, you don't want it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it flies that way. So that's the hard sell I'm having at this juncture, at this point. But I'm always open. I'll be glad to hear from the applicants and protesters. But in looking at this piece of parcel, having lived around the water all my life, been around boat yards, been around fish houses, been around marinas, it just causes me a little angst that I'm sure that I'll get over, but that's the way that I'm looking at it at the present time. So does any other member of the commission have any question for Mr. Woodward at the present time?
This is Dr. Neal.
Dr. Neal, proceed, please.
I guess this is more of a help me be more clear in my mind. It seems that a lot of what we're looking at and we're talking about are revisiting Wetlands Board decisions, and I don't. Which I don't think that's not what this was brought before us for.
No, sir, it's not. It is not on appeal, and it is not within your purview.
All right, so I would, so the Wetlands Board has done what the Wetlands Board's done, and so they've done it. And if we're not going to, if their decision is not on trial here, quote unquote, what are we actually deciding today? What are we supposed to be looking at? Thank you. That's my question.
If that question's to me, what is in the board's jurisdiction currently is starting again at the southeastern corner of the breakwater, which will be installed channelward of mean low water with additional sand fill to create that living shoreline area in that corner. The portions of the proposed boat ramp that extend channelward of mean low water, the flanking timber jetties at the ramp, all of the bulkhead replacement will be channelward of low water, as currently the low water line is the bulkhead line. The timber wave screen on that upper corner where the little marsh icon is. The piers, Mike, can you go back to the plan view drawing? All of the structures channelward of mean low water, and for all intents and purposes, you can see, if you were to start at the far west end, you can see the mean low water line dashed blue. So in this drawing, it's clear that the red proposed 205 feet of riprap revetment is above the board's above the commission's jurisdiction, has been duly approved by the Wetlands Board. As we transition from there around, all of the replacement bulkheading to the ramp will be channelward of mean low water. The piers, channelward of mean low water. The wave screen, channelward of mean low water. a portion of the boat ramp and the breakwater and portions of the fill are channelward of mean low water. So that's what's, I believe, in the board's purview right now.
Before we move along, and not to belabor it, since we've asked a question of jurisdiction and we're paying a lawyer good money to sit there on our behalf, Ms. Block, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Jay summed it up pretty well. The well issues have been handled. So everything below mean low water is what we should be considering today. I did have one clarification question for Jay. When was this permit application submitted?
Originally, hold one. We received the application on May 30th of 2020. And just to elaborate a little bit, you will note on this drawing and all the drawings that were in my presentation, there's a revision date of 8/7/2020. All of these revisions were done in light of the comments and concerns raised by the protestants who felt that there were inaccuracies in the application. So the application was received May 30th. The Wetlands Board heard it in August, and the revisions were received in August as well.
Okay, but the application was originally submitted in May.
Yeah, May 30th, 2020 is when it was originally received.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're back in line. Any further questions by members of the commission for Mr. Woodward? Okay, hearing none, we have the applicant, which is Frankie Davis, and his wife, Katie, and the agent is Joey Scott. Who will be speaking on this case?
I will, the agent, Joseph Scott.
Mr. Scott, you solemnly swear the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Would you like to address the commission?
Yeah, for the sake of brevity, I'll give you a little teeny bit more background beyond what Jay has given. Essentially, you already know this parcel was bought from the bank by the Davises. They didn't have zoning approved for it, residential with a special exception. That was finally done in July. That was a very long, drawn-out process as well, because the adjacent folks actually were protesting that decision as well. So this project for the erosion control was initiated in the fall of 2019. The Davises went to Brian Barnes, who is the zoning administrator and the codes compliance officer for wetlands in Lancaster County, and asked about repairing the bulkhead. Brian made a couple suggestions of the multiple erosion control structures that would probably need to be used. It came to me in December of January, pretty much January of this year. I didn't really get to start on it until February. I went down there and looked at it. I looked at the state that the bulkhead was in and knew right away that it probably couldn't be considered a repair. So I reached out to Jay. We met on site in February. And of course, all COVID happened, and some of the Lancaster hearings were pushed back. It was finally heard in August. You know, it's that wetlands portion of it's been approved. If you look through your packets, we did, actually I did, I responded to the NOAA comments, the VMS comments, and both of the objecting neighbors, the Mrazes and Town Creek LLP. I did not respond to the one that I just received yesterday morning, but we wanted to make sure all that was laid out to kind of let folks know what we were trying to do, you know, so I wouldn't have to give a big presentation on it here today. When this came to me, I was kind of excited. It's a wharf-like facility to house a marine construction business, but also continue to allow loading and unloading of seafood. And there has to be multiple strategies on this site. The stone revetment, we have to minimize the impact. Of course, that's not within your jurisdiction, but the reason why it's there, we didn't want to make an impact on the RPA. And also the zoning, in order to stay in compliance with the zoning parameters set out that Davis's couldn't actually remove any trees from that buffer there. So a living shoreline in that was out of the question, you know, in many senses. Bulkhead, obviously, bulkheading the area that he wants to bulkhead because he wants it to be functional. That's one of the biggest issues on that corner that we're talking about there. The water does drop off very quickly. A sill would be very problematic with water depth, and it would lose the functionality of that particular portion of the project. So a lot of where we are putting bulkhead is strictly for functional purposes. The boat ramp's already been talked about in terms of this location. And of course, the breakwater has been proposed to be, you know, in compliance with making some impacts to some grass that has come up through the oyster shells. And also, you know, it does add a nice living shoreline component to this aspect of it, and it's a good spot for it because there's already an existing beach to the south of it, you know, where the Morazes is. And if that beach has survived all these years with that bulkhead next to it, hopefully, you know, the breakwater shouldn't make that much of a difference, in my opinion, in terms of any sort of adverse effects. If anything, it should hopefully help. But anyway, that's all of those things were in your package. If you have any questions for me, you know, beyond what I just touched base on here, what you guys are talking about, I'm willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any questions of Mr. Scott, the agent for the Davises, by members of the commission? Thank you, Mr. Scott. Just to be certain.
Yes, I have a question, if I could.
Mr. Tankard?
I'm sorry, my fingers didn't work as well on the unmute
okay.
button there, but I did have one question for Mr. Davis. Is, you know,
sir, Mr. Tankard, Mr. Davis,
yeah.
Mr. Davis is not on at the present time. It would be Mr. Scott's agent. The property owner is not on.
Excuse me. Mr. Scott. Okay.
Okay.
So my question is,
Mr.
Callis it was stated that Mr. Callis, this is secondhand information, believe that the bulkhead should just go around the whole place like it used to. Did you all contemplate that at all?
Well, from the time that we got in there, of course, if we could do that all the way around, I believe that the applicant would want that if he could do that. But one of the issues that we had was there were going to be some impacts. So we decided that this could be a spot where we could incorporate something to offset the impacts, because the bulkhead is more valuable up in the creek as opposed to having it right there. But the argument over protection, you know, who's to say? But yeah, I do believe that the applicant, if he could just re-bulkhead the whole thing, would have probably gone that route.
So can I have a follow-up question there?
Yes, sir, please.
Sure.
So what I'm understanding you to also say is that the applicant worked within the protestants or what the county had desired to be a bit more accommodative than he would have liked the structure to have been representing over.
Yes, we've worked extensively with the agencies involved to try to make this, like I said, functional, but also, you know, within environmentally friendly, I guess you would want to say. I can't think of a better word, but.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Further questions for the gentleman? All right. Thank you. I just want to make sure one last time that the applicant, Frankie Davis, and his wife, Katie, do not wish to address the commission. I've not heard from them. Mr. Scott, do you know that you're representing them here today? Is that what we have? Yes,
I think they may be on the line, but I don't know if they would want to speak.
Well, you've heard me ask 3 times, and that's it. So we'll move right along. I've got a list of folks that want to speak, and it's in a little bit of a let's see. I guess the best thing to do is to go to Mr. and Mrs. Bob Moraz first. They seem to be the adjoining property owner. Then I have Brian Peoples, who's an attorney for adjacent property owner Mancuso and Vining, and also a Mr. Bill Emery. So at this time, I'll get the folks that are the closest impacted, unless I'm wrong, which would be the Morazes, to to address the commission if they would like to. Are y'all on the phone?
Yes, I'm on the speakerphone or on the computer. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hear you very well. Is this Mr. Bob Mraz?
Thank you.
Mraz, okay. Do you solemnly swear the testimony that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. I'm seeing a presentation going up. And just let us know when you're ready to proceed.
I'm Bob Mrazes. My wife Karen's not here, but I have two of my neighbors, the the Haydens. They're also listening in. And I'm the adjacent property owner, and actually I'm not the closest one. The Vining, Scott Vining and Chris is the closest ones. But since you
Okay,
put me
we'll
in the
get to
spot, I'll
everybody.
take it. Yep.
Okay.
My property, the Oyster House, and as Mr. Emery hit Mr. Woodward, that the first house that he showed was Mr. Emery's house and not mine. Mine was to the left outside the picture. But I got a clear view of the Oyster House, and that's just where I'm at. My complaint, or not complaint, my comments were against the administrative errors in the drawings, which have been mostly fixed, the beach area, the wave screen, and the riprap revetment. And my biggest concern is the riprap revetment, because I believe that wherever you put it, and as you're looking at this picture here, the PVC stakes, the cutout and the cloth that's got to go into it is going to cut down a lot of the trees that are already right at the water line. And my biggest question, what are you going to do with the root balls in these trees after you cut them down and take them out? You got a great big hole in there. You've now destroyed all that that root mass that was holding the shore and the water line back. Your ability to answer, but if somebody can answer answer that for me, I appreciate it. The other issue we had was the beach, and I agree with Mr. Callis that I think the first storm comes along, the beach is going to be gone, and my concern is who's going to take liability for the damages that happens, because once the beach goes, the Mancuso Vining piece of property is going to go with it. There's going to be a big hole there. If you go back to the stonework, if you go to the next picture, number 2, there's a lot of trees that are going to be in the area that are going to be impacted. One is already in the water line below the stake, and there's the 2 that you can see, and there are several more going along the beach line, and some are in the water. They provide a nice environment for the herons and the fish that are there. And there's an old dead pine tree that you can't really see, but it's way up high in the sky, and it provides a very good hunting ground or hunting perch for the bald eagles and the ospreys and the herons when they get up there. So treeage that's going to be removed, and I don't really see how the thinks that they can do all that work and not disturb any bit of this down there. Screen, and I don't have the yeah, this is one of the other pictures. You can see that the stake, there's an awful lot of trees that are really close to the stake line, and I think a lot of vegetation is going to be torn down to put in there. And you can't do a living shoreline. I would say to leave it entirely alone. It's been doing fine since the 10 years we've been here, and it's probably been fine for 20 years. And there's a little bit of undercutting, but leave it alone. My best choice. I think the wave screen is just going to be a place to park additional place for Mr. Davis's barges. It doesn't serve any purpose, and VIMS has already commented to it. There's other people going to be talking about it as well. I don't think it adds anything at all. If we go to in my list for you guys that might be following along, and if you go to the next picture, please. There you go. In the JPA, they has asked if there's any fuel storage, and the answer was no. And here is a drone picture of the steel building at the top of the hill, and you're looking at 3 approximately 500-gallon tanks. So I think that needs to be corrected. If we go on to number 3, my question about the docking. So exactly does docking mean? Does it mean parking the boats? Is letting them stay, or is it coming in and unloading and offloading? And the verbiage seems to have expanded itself from just docking and fisheries to shipping and cargo. And that gets me a little concerned that this is going to be turned into a marine terminal now instead of just a oysterman and fisherman house and a marine facility. So I'm a little concerned about where that's going as well. So that, septic system and the proposed 40-foot house. I'm bringing these up because they all show up on your website. So whether you have any jurisdiction, I'm not sure, but I have my chance and I'm going to do it. So there's a 4-bedroom house proposed right where in this picture here, there's that rusted roof of the shed.
Sir?
And it's about 4.
Sir?
Yes.
You took your
Yes.
shot, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to overrule you on that. That's out of our purview and not for consideration.
It was in your website as documents, so I figured I'd comment to it.
Understood.
Well, that's all I've got to complain about.
I don't consider them complaints. I consider them concerns, so for sure. Any member of the commission?
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any member of the commission have any questions for Mr. Bob Matarazz? Thank you. Seeing no questions, thank you. The next person I have is Mr. Bill Emery. Mr. Bill Emery had spoken a little bit earlier on a clarification, so I'll go to Mr. Emery. Mr. Emery, you there?
I am here. Can you hear me, Commissioner Bowman?
Loud and clear, sir. Do you solemnly swear the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Could you proceed, please, sir?
I'm just looking for my first slide. Has it appeared?
I'm still working on it.
Okay.
Take your time, Mike.
Sorry, Mike, for the pressure. Technology.
Can you see it?
I can see portion. I can see the critical portion, so I guess hopefully it'll clear up on the other ones. Members of the commission, I thank you for your service to the Commonwealth in these challenging times and for the opportunity to speak with you. My name's Bill Emery. Our home is located in Town Creek. Our property abuts that of the applicant. The wharf under discussion today was constructed by Lewis Callis in 1957 next to his home to serve his seafood business. So if you can see the illustration inside that green circle is it's a pre-wharf topo map, and you can see his house. The wharf's construction predated Virginia's adoption of the Wetlands Act and Lancaster County's adoption of a zoning code. Next slide, please, Mike. Oh, wow. It's postage. You know, they're all 1028 pixels on the long side, so I'm not sure why that shrunk. But if you had your magnifying glass, that's just a aerial view of Callus's seafood. Stretching it out. Excellent. So the applicant's 5.76 acre parcel is the base of operations for Marine Construction Company, a use granted by the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors on this residentially zoned creek via special exception in July of 2019. The joint permit application seeks to employ various hardening techniques over 700 plus feet of shoreline bordering Town Creek. Additionally, the JPA seeks new construction of 2 piers and a wave screen, plus fill over subaqueous bottom of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Next slide, please. I have thoroughly enjoyed living next to Callus's Wharf for the past 30 years, and I hope to enjoy living by the newly christened Rappahannock Wharf from now. I support this property's use as a working waterfront, as a piece of real property that provides access to coastal waters to people engaged in water-dependent businesses. Properly designed, this working waterfront will be a net positive contribution to regional environmental sustainability, better water quality, greater biodiversity, and more ecosystem services while protecting the applicant's waterside property and enhancing the county's economy. A wharf today does not have to be built to 1957 guidelines. These modern rehabilitations are improved by site-specific best management practices. Next slide, please. Using this ample shore as their canvas and working in cooperation with the recommendations of federal and state agencies, the applicant and his agent can make the reconstructed Rappahannock Wharf a showcase of shoreline protection approaches. Even though their performance here is guided by Senate Bill 964, the site has the potential to display design techniques that will be in higher demand following the passage of Senate Bill 776. The carefully redesigned wharf would be a great sales tool. Northern Neck Marine Construction customers would be able to view the quality of Northern Neck Marine Construction's work in several different shoreline protection modalities. Here a breakwater, there a marsh tow sill with wetlands behind, here a riprap revetment, there a bulkhead, and in the distance, a hardy riparian buffer. So what do NOAA and VMS recommend for Rappahannock Wharf? On the screen now is my graphical interpretation of Emily Hines' July 2020 report. Along the northern shore of the wharf, Ms. Hines recommends a mix of sill and revetment. Near the wharf's east, we have a generous section of bulkhead in yellow to allow for the easy loading and unloading of the applicant's barges. On the wharf's west extent, 3 piers are proposed. One of the 3, the existing 12 by 40, will be repaired. The piers allow mooring, potentially for watermen, and easy access over the sill revetment for unloading their cat. NOAA's David O'Brien suggests that the planned 70-foot living shoreline to the southeast, quote, should not be considered as compensation for proposed project impacts until avoidance and minimization of unavoidable impacts can be demonstrated. O'Brien continues, quote, therefore, we recommend removing the existing deteriorated bulkhead timbers in their entirety, constructing a new bulkhead landward to reduce channelward encroachment and minimize impacts to vegetated and non-vegetated tidal wetlands. Next slide, please, Mike. With incorporation of the VIMS and NOAA recommendations, oops, thank you so much. With incorporation of the VIMS and NOAA recommendations, this project has great potential. However, as presently designed, the project fails to meet the bar set by Senate Bill 964 from 2011 and fails to meet permit condition E, which we've heard before today. The permittees shall, to the greatest extent practicable, minimize the adverse effects of the project upon adjacent properties and wetlands and upon the natural resources of the Commonwealth, end quote. Our goal in the JPA process is for all involved. I am troubled by how we have arrived at the present juncture. A prerequisite for the granting of a JPA is a local wetlands board permit. Mike, next slide, please. Presumably, the issuance of a permit would require several actions from the Wetlands Board. At a minimum, the Wetlands Board would consider materials they receive from the scientists. They would consider input from the public at their public hearing. They would hear from staff and the applicant. After discussion and deliberation, they would vote on the permit, providing a rationale for their decision. Slide, please. A little bit of 9-point surface runoff there. In this case, the Wetlands Board did not reference or review the VIMS report at the time of their hearing, August 13th, 2020. On August 13th, after receiving input from staff and the public, the board voted to accept the application as submitted without any discussion, no discussion, regarding, well, there were 96 words between 4 of the 5 board members, without any discussion regarding wetlands impacts and without any statement regarding the rationale for their decision. The JPA instructions state, clear and accurate drawings are essential for project review and compliance determination. The plan views submitted by the applicant in May are clear regarding what they hope to build, but they are inaccurate and incomplete regarding existing conditions. Next slide, please. No one has accurately determined where mean high and mean low water falls on this property. As a result, there are wetland impacts that were not discussed or considered by the Lancaster County Wetlands Board in advance of approving the project as presented. Additionally, state subaqueous lands within the perimeter of the bulkhead have not been quantified to facilitate your discussion. The plan views submitted by the applicant are based on a 2011 boundary survey. The majority of the perimeter under your consideration is the water boundary, which is an old, inaccurate, and out-of-date graphical approximation. The water boundary requires a current field survey to quantify the wetlands. Next slide, please. You know, I hope you will agree we can do better on this project. We can do better by today remanding this matter back to the Wetlands Board for a database second look, a fulsome study of the intertidal impacts based on a current survey as was done in Accomack County in JPA 200808 last month. With time, with guidance from this commission, and with the incorporation of advice from VIMS and NOAA, will come a redesign and a resubmission. The habitat and waters of Virginia have this additional prudence. So I ask that you move today to remand. Thank you. I do have just one or two other comments regarding the tree line along the revetment. We were shown, I think, slides from, 59 and 1965, and they make me wonder, what is the rate in there? You know, the fetch there is what is categorized by VMS as very low. The tree line, you know, if the tree line's not eroding, why take out a whole riparian buffer so you can put some stone at the bottom? It just seems like a bad idea. I think, what are the benefits from good project drawings? The drawings are beautiful. The presentation is well done. Everybody has done their job, but no one has determined the intertidal area, and that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Emery, members of the commission? All right, the hearing none. Next person will be Mr. Brian Peoples, attorney for adjacent property owner Mancuso and Vining. Mr. Peoples, are you there?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes, sir. We sure can.
It is afternoon, isn't it? Well, thanks. Good afternoon, Chairman Bowman and members of the VMRC. Again, I represent Ms. Kristen Mancuso and Mr. Scott Vining, who again are the owners of the very closest property, the adjacent property. They're located immediately to the south along that beach line that runs along the on the east side there, and their address, just for the record, is 314 Callis Road in Lancaster. I'm not going to try to be too redundant over by repeating a lot of the comments that have been said previously, but I would like to say that we agree with those, and just for the record, incorporate them into our objection as well. A little bit about the property that my clients own. It's a beautiful place. Again, right there on the water. It has a historic farmhouse that was built around 1900. The beach and the picture that you're looking at now. If you see the, I think you know where it is. It's immediately to the south, and you can see the beach right there, immediately to the south of the applicant's property. That's where my client's property is. Again, it's got a great farmhouse there. It's got this beautiful beach, and it's probably the property that stands to most be physically affected by the proposal. And we're in a little bit of a different time because there's been talk about the Senate bills and everything else, but this is law now, you know, and in July, Virginia Code 28.2-104.1D did go into effect, and in relevant part that says, and I'm quoting here, the commission shall permit only living shoreline approaches to shoreline management unless the best available science shows that such approaches are not suitable. So that's the law. And what we're faced here with is a situation where the best available science, in fact, does show that there are other usable, more suitable alternatives available and preferable, and therefore, according to the law, they have to be incorporated. And what I mean there is that, and I know we're not talking about the stone revetment because that's outside of the jurisdiction, being landward of mean low water, but even not taking that into account, the applicant here is proposing to build hundreds and hundreds of feet, 400 or 500 feet of hardened shoreline, you know, using, again, the stone, but also these timber bulkheads, while only putting in a very small portion of a living shoreline. And we do commend the effort to put in that living shoreline, but, you know, again, by percentage, it's really, really small. You're talking about, you know, 70 feet of a breakwater as compared to hundreds and hundreds of feet of something that's hardened and that is not a living shoreline, and that we're really supposed to be getting away from to the maximum extent that it's possible. And again, I recognize that we're not here to relitigate the Wetlands Board and that decision is final because it was an appeal. But I just do want to reiterate the fact that we shouldn't just assume that everything they said was 100% correct and rubber stamp it, not because they didn't do a good job. That's not what I'm saying at all, but it does look like they didn't have some of the information at the time, because looking at the dates on the VMS report and the NOAA report, which I'll go into just in a little bit of detail here in a second, it looks like the Wetlands Board didn't have that before them. So in other words, they didn't have the best available science in front of them when they made their decision. And I just ask you to keep that in your mind. Again, not asking you to overturn the Wetlands Board, because I don't think you even could legally, but it is something to take into consideration because it is part of the public trust doctrine, which of course you're all very familiar with, and that's 28.2.1205, that you are supposed to take other things into consideration, including the wetlands, including adjacent property owners, including water quality, which I'll speak to in a second. So that's the reason I bring that up about the Wetlands Board. So here we have a situation, and to Chairman Bowman's point, there probably does need to be some balancing done when you look at working waterfronts and commercial properties and their uses. But the code itself doesn't differentiate between the requirements. In other words, I think the code is pretty clear that when living shorelines are possible, when they're suitable, they still have to be used. And we're not here trying to say that this parcel of property shouldn't be used as a working waterfront. There's a lot of benefits to working waterfronts, to the economy, and there's a lot of history there and such like that. But that doesn't really change the fact that if there are better ways to do the shoreline, then those should be done. And again, the science shows us that there are. The VMRC report has been mentioned a little bit. I also want to bring out the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA's report, understanding that NOAA is a federal agency and they advise the Army Corps of Engineers, but they still are very, very capable scientists, and they've written a report that has some really, really interesting stuff, and that's all part of what we call the best available science, which is what 28.2.104.1 requires us to look at. For example, they say that the entire failed timber bulkhead should be removed, which I think we all agree with, but they also say that the new one shouldn't be built any farther channelward. In fact, it should be pulled back landward. Okay, and that's the best available science. That's NOAA. And they've also talked about the proposed mitigation measures, understanding that, that some mitigation measures have been put into place with this plan, but NOAA says that that's not going to adequately compensate for the impacts of the project, and that since those impacts can be avoided, they should be. And according from that report, from the NOAA report, it says, quote, compensation should not be used to justify impacts that can be avoided. And that's part of the best available science. And again, NOAA tells us that we shouldn't permit this project unless the applicant submits some specific plans. They want a plan for wetland monitoring, adaptive management, invasive species mitigation, and I don't think that those plans have been submitted. And NOAA also wants those plans to be not only just submitted, but also approved by the appropriate regulatory agencies. VMRC's report also agrees with NOAA, and it points out too that the purpose and efficacy, and I'm quoting now, the purpose and efficacy of the proposed wave screen at the northeast corner of the shoreline is unclear, and it might reflect wave energy onto the eastern side of the site. Okay, so VMRC also said that they don't really even understand the purpose of this wave screen, which is really just like an extension of the bulkhead to the northeast. They don't know what it's going to do that's positive, but they do think that it could do something that's negative, which is to direct the wave action towards the eastern side of the property, remembering again, please, that that's where my clients live. Okay, that's their beach, right? So this wave screen, it has a very good chance of affecting the beach. They also talk about the sidewalls of the boat ramp, which could impact the existing and proposed wetlands planning, and they're not sure about the sand nourishment as well. And I'm going to skip the part about the stone revetment because it's really not within the purview today. But I will point out something that is not in my letter. I think it's really important. Looking at, again, I'm back to the public trust doctrine now, 28.2.1205. There are certain things that this board has to take into consideration, and one of those is water quality. And I have read the VMRC report, and I have read the NOAA report, and unless I'm missing it, I'm not seeing where water quality was assessed at all. And the reason that that's extremely important is because the whole purpose of living shorelines, the whole purpose of 28.2.104.1b, or at least a huge part of the purpose, is about water quality, because those hardened shorelines are not good water quality. The reason that we're trying to get away from them is because they have a negative impact on the ecosystem. They have a negative impact on the little plants that the little animals eat, and then the bigger animals eat the little animals, bigger animals, and that's negatively impacted. So again, that's just something that has to be, by the code, by the public trust doctrine, we have to assess the impact on water quality. And just speaking for my clients, they're the people that stand to be most harmed by this, not only because of that wave screen that doesn't seem to serve any purpose other than directing waves toward their property, possibly by this breakwater that's going to be very, very near the property line. We're not sure what the impact of that is going to be on my client's beach. That should probably be studied. But most importantly, and just to summarize, just to hit this point again, the law, I'm talking about the newly enacted law, says that we cannot permit shoreline approaches when the best available science shows that other things are available. VMS tells us that other approaches are available. Other approaches to include doing different things, going around that corner, that northeast corner, and heading south, going along the eastern side of the property. Understanding that might make it a little harder or more inconvenient for the applicant, but there is a balance, and when better things are suitable and can be done, they have to be done, and that's just the law. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I am willing and happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Any questions for Mr. Peoples or members of the commission?
This is Adrian here.
Go ahead, Mr. Zadrin, please.
Mr. Peoples, is your client's position then that bulkhead should go all the way to the end of the property as it is now in lieu of that preventment?
Our position is that the VMS suggestion, which I'm not a maritime engineer, but I understood that it had that there would be some mixture of sill and bulkhead along the eastern side of the wall, but that's what should be done because that's what's the best available science is recommending, sir.
Okay.
Further questions of the counselor? I have a question for VMS. Ms. Hind, you there?
Yes, sir.
We've heard some concern by counsel for the clients that the energy charge caused by the wave screen could negatively impact the adjoining property. What is the difference in overall impact by an established wooden bulkhead versus a replacement wave screen? What's more impactful if one versus the other, and if so, how? Just to educate me, because like the counselor, I'm not a maritime engineer.
Well, sir, neither am I, but as a coastal geologist, I can speak to that a little bit. Any vertical wall in the marine environment will reflect wave energy into the near shore to a greater extent than a structure that is at a shallower angle, like you would find in a revetment or a sill or a breakwater. Mm-hmm. In regards to the specific wave screen at that point that's proposed, in our comments to clarify, we suggest that they will reflect waves onto the vegetation to the south and the southern portion of the property of the applicant, but with the other proposed structures, including the breakwater and the boat ramp between that wave screen and the protestant's property, it's unlikely that those impacts would be very large that far away.
Okay, so I think the answer to a layman such as myself is there's not a whole lot of difference between an established linear bulkhead and a wave screen. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, they are both vertical walls in the marine environment.
My next question is this: dealing with living shorelines, and I think I've heard it argued in earlier cases, not today, but before the commission, that a significant fetch of wave energy makes it extremely difficult for a living shoreline to establish. Is that correct or incorrect?
It's a bit nuanced. Living shorelines encompass a wide variety of structures in
Yes.
Virginia. And so you can design fairly large breakwaters, for example, that can function as living shorelines with a planted beach area behind them. And that can function out on the open bay in fairly large wave energy environments, to the other extreme of needing to only grade and plant and maybe add some sand nourishment to an area would also be a living shoreline. So as long as the structures are designed appropriately for the specific environment at a site, living shoreline type designs can work well in a variety of wave energies.
Okay. But in this scenario, it would require a significant more amount of, looking at the picture that I'm looking at now, of channelward encroachment by riprap, fill behind there, and then plantings behind that to construct the living shoreline per se in that scenario. Would that be correct?
It could be, depending on how the agent designed the project.
Okay. All right. Any follow-up to any questions that I had for Ms. Hind? Okay, seeing none, and again, I apologize if we're out of sequence, but I have here an oyster planting ground leaseholder, Mike Callis, that's here, the list that wishes to speak. Mr. Callis, are you there? I'll wrap this, I promise I'll wrap this up in a systematic way toward the end. Mr. Callis? Mr. Callis, all right. Is there anyone here in the public else in support? Anyone else in opposition that I have not heard? Okay, the applicant has 3 minutes to rebut, and then the matter will go before the commission. So that would be you, Mr. Scott.
Okay, hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
So yeah, there's a lot going on here, a lot of pontificating and prognosticating, but one of the biggest issues that we have from a living shoreline approach really is water depth more than anything. That picture that's on the screen right now, Mr. Davis wanted to put the breakwater as far away from the vining as he could because he didn't want to cause any sort of issues. And as you can see, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner of that, you can see the shallows there, and then you can see the darker water. It falls off significantly quick. Everything is kind of located where it's located due to the constraints of the site. And more than anything, that's really just kind of the underlying theme of all of this is we have site constraints we tried to work within. We had, usage that we were trying to stick with in terms of the bulkhead on the other side and being able to marginally moor a boat or a vessel and have a machine go up to the edge and be able to load it. Redneck Marine Construction does living shorelines. They're one of the few guys around who actually do them from barge, which is actually preferred because a lot of times you have to destroy the RPA, to build a living shoreline and then go back and replant the RPA. So we were trying to work within the constraints of the site and the functionality that he was after. And a lot of the talk of the living shorelines, I mean, I've done quite a few of these. I don't just do these, I do all of them. Living shorelines, revetment, bulkhead, whatever, is really site constraints that kind of pigeonholed us in some places. So that's all I have to say on all the talk about the living shoreline. And then if you guys have any other questions about anything else.
Any questions from the commission for the gentleman? There being none, the matter is before the commission, and I must warn that this is a quasi-judicial hearing. Utilization of the chat function while someone else is talking violates the provisions of the quasi-judicial rule of law upon what we must have to deal with as we deal with evidence that's not subject to cross-examination. So please refrain from using the chat bar to try to throw in ideas while someone else is speaking. Number one, it's rude, and number two, it borders on being unlawful as far as the matter is concerned.
Yeah,
Matters before the commission for discussion and action.
Commissioner Bowman, if I could just continue on that idea.
Yes, ma'am. Counselor for the Office of the Attorney General, Kelsey Block, you may.
I don't think things put in the chat bar should be included in the official record.
They won't.
Just double checking.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bowman.
Mr. France.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to commend the applicant on trying to maximize the use of this facility while reducing all the impacts that he could. Years ago, I've kept a boat here, and the right-hand corner where you see that big boat at the top, if you have to tie there, a wave screen would be extremely helpful. It does get extremely rough there. I think he's done a good job of trying to take advantage of everything he has here and restore it to a working area that will really benefit watermen in this area. And I would move to accept the proposal as is.
So that's a motion made to approve the project as presented. Is there a second to the motion?
Dr. Neal, I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Just further discussion.
Yes, Zedrin.
Dr. Long day. Mr. Zedrin, proceed, please.
You know, what I heard today, and everybody did an excellent presentation, and I think the design of this thing is fantastic, considering the different shapes of this parcel. But, you know, what I kind of heard today was a lot of people were upset with the Wetlands Board and then zoning and different things like that. And I think that, you know, Mr. Scott and his client and they've done an excellent job here. The first thing that I noticed about this is all these creosote pilings that are on this pier as it exists. And you know, we don't often hear that they're going to pull out all that stuff and put down something that's appropriate and environmentally friendly. So I think that they've done a great job for that. And then to accommodate, you know, the laws with it, breakwater and things of that nature. And it looked over there where they got the preventment is, it looked like the shoreline is falling in and because of the erosion. And when I looked at that picture, I mean, the trees are falling over and that's a terrible erosion situation there that's not going to go away unless there's something done to it. So I think Mr. Scott and them have done an excellent job, and I'm in support of the position of their recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Zedrin. Further discussion?
Commissioner Bowman, may I make a general comment?
You sure may, because I'm going to make one too, but go ahead. Maybe you'll cover mine.
I'm not sure. So I do think that this is a pretty, you know, complex issue, and I do think that there's a lot of different proposals in various aspects, kind of almost more at the tail end in the 11th hour. But, you know, I do just, as a general comment, I think on areas like this, if there is opportunity for more dynamic or natural living shoreline components, I hope we'll get to these earlier in the process in other cases. I know that's hard to say because of various jurisdiction, and of course a lot of this review is done the Wetlands Board, but it's too bad that we're kind of looking at improvements at such a late stage in the game, because I think that is challenging for the applicant and all those involved.
Well, I'm not sure if you're talking specifically about this project, but I just want to look at the global aspect of looking at improvement at the late game. I think mankind has been for many years sometimes behind the ball as far as making improvements before it's too late, but then just throw up your hands and not do anything is not prudent either. I think that this commission, as a result of the discussions we've had with Secretary Strickler and the laws that have come out of the General Assembly, have taken into consideration the efficacies and benefits of living shorelines. And I know, at least in my mind, I applied them to this project as well. I'm looking at it right now thinking, what if, what could, what is this the right place, is not the right place? I mean, and I think every member of this commission does a great job of looking at what our charge is pursuant to a lot of different things. As Counselor referred to the public trust doctrine, I hold that near and dear to my heart. And it's one of those things that's not, it would be so much easier if it was so clear cut, but it's not. And I think it's intentionally left somewhat vague and left open for interpretation as the trier of the fact looks at it and makes a determination. But as far as the SB 776 and 104.1 and things that we're dealing with now, I think we're doing a good job. Now, those that are aggrieved by our decision probably don't think so. But that's unfortunately the way things go in the hearing process that we had. So I just wanted to piggyback on to what you had to say, because I think we're saying the same thing, just only in a different way. And I couldn't agree more with you. Any further comments before I call the question? I have a motion made by Mr. France, seconded by Dr. Neal to approve the project as presented. Mr. France?
Aye.
Mr. Tankard?
Aye.
Mr. Zedrin?
Aye.
Dr. Neal?
Aye.
Mr. Minor?
Aye.
Ms. Lusk?
Aye.
Ms. Everett?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone, from Jay to everyone, for a great presentation, great debate. That's what makes this job what it is, and it's a great one. So thank you all very, very much. I really do appreciate that. Get to my next item on the agenda, Mr. Derek Owens, number 20-1009. And that would be Mike Johnson. He's going to really multitask now. By the way, Mr. Johnson has been doing all the presentations today, I believe, no, from home. He's been doing some stuff from home. We've got Allison Lay inside the facility doing the multitasking. So everything that you have seen today has been put on by two individuals in different locations, and I think they deserve certainly a round of applause when we're over with for doing a great job. So with that, Mr. Johnson, if you would proceed.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. Mr. Derek Owens is requesting authorization to install a 5-foot wide by 148-foot long open pile private pier with a 10-foot by 12-foot deck, and that's going to be attached to an existing permitted boathouse structure along Free School Creek at 442 Schoolhouse Road in Gloucester County. The project is protested by an adjacent property owner. In the slide, you can see the project area highlighted in yellow. This project is located at the mouth of Free School Creek, and this is a tributary to the Severn River in Mobjack Bay in Gloucester County. Here's a look at the project area. Again, the proposed work area highlighted by the yellow marker. And the protestant, Miss Ann Rex, owns the property circled in red, which is off to the northeast. Here's the closer project area. Please note that the boathouse you see here was authorized to be replaced by the Commission at its May 2018 meeting. The authorized boathouse is a double slip enclosed boathouse with exterior deck space. The aerial you see here shows the original boathouse, and the replacement has not been completed yet. The boathouse is permitted to be reconstructed in its original footprint, and the proposed pier will also be in the same footprint you see in this photo. The applicant wants to replace the pier as it was accidentally removed by the contractor when they started work on the boathouse. It was not proposed to be replaced in the application for the boathouse, and the justification for the pier replacement is to moor a sailboat owned by the applicant. There's a second pier on the property on the south-facing shoreline, right about here. This pier in its current configuration meets the exemption requirements in the Code of Virginia, and staff has discussed having this pier enlarged to accommodate the applicant's needs for mooring a sailboat. But due to the fetch and the proposed location for the pier is also protected by the rock sill in this area here, the applicant would rather replace the pier that he had. Staff also notes that there is a seagrass bed offshore south-facing shoreline, and it would be preferable from an environmental perspective to build the pier in the area proposed, as the pier on the south-facing area would shade, some seagrass in that area. Starting to get into the project drawings supplied by the agent for the applicant. This is simply showing the property, approximate property boundaries of the applicant, Mr. Owens, and the protestant, Ms. Rex, here off to the northeast. Plan view drawing showing the location of the 148-foot long pier and 10-foot by 12-foot deck header. You can have some benchmarks from the existing house. Pier would extend again 1 feet with a 12-foot by 10-foot section, so approximately 100-foot long pier. Here's a plan showing the previously authorized boathouse dimensions and the proposed pier, 140 long pier and 10-foot, 12-foot deck. This is cross-sectional showing the water depths along the pier. You can see at the end of the pier, out here where the pier head is located, we have about -6 feet mean low water, which would facilitate the mooring of the sailboat. Finally, we have a benchmark showing the distance from the rock sill, showing there will be no impact to navigation between the pier and the rock sill as well. Now we're getting into some ground shots. You can see that the old boathouse and pier have been removed, and they have started construction on the authorized boathouse. They have ceased construction for the moment, waiting for the permits for this pier to come through. The new pier would be located on the left side of this boathouse, extending out to some pilings out here that you'll have a better view of in a minute. Angle showing the deck space in the boathouse pilings that have been driven. And another angle, just turning to the right a little bit, you can see the end of the boathouse here. The pilings you see out here in the water were actually left over from the original pier, and that just so they could get the alignment correct on the new pier. And this would be the channelward terminus out here of the new pier as well. Just so you can kind of see what used to exist there, here's a ground shot of the old pier and boathouse. The pier coming out to the small deck out here, you can see extending off to the left. This is just the other side of the boathouse looking upstream. You can see that there are a number of other piers and even another semi-enclosed boathouse up here to the right. This is a list of vessel and documentation provided by the applicant, Mr. Owens, in their joint permit application. You can see here they have listed a 27-foot Catalina, and they approximate the draft at approximately 6 feet. So we can see why they're trying to ask for the pier to go out as far as they do. VMRC has received a number of letters of protest from Ms. Rex. Her first is in your packets, but the one I have exhibited here was received by VMRC on Friday and too late to include in your packets. If you would like to, I can certainly read this into the record at the Commission's request, but I will be glad just to leave this up if you read it as well. In her first letter, Ms. Rex cites concerns with increased boat traffic to the installation of the pier, which may be causing erosion on her property, other environmental impacts, and the potential commercial use of the pier. In her second letter here, she also states that it'd be more preferable to extend the existing pier on the south side of the property. As I stated earlier, this was rejected by the applicant as that area received higher wave energy and he already had a pier that he did not want removed, protected by the spit. Also, staff feels the proposed location is preferable to the presence of the seagrass on the south-facing shoreline that will be shaded by any new pier construction. Staff is sensitive to Mrs. Rex's concerns about the pier and her wishes to have a quiescent water view from her property. However, staff notes the pier, before it was removed, had existed at this location and in the configuration proposed since 1962. Therefore, the replacement of the pier will not increase the impact to her view shed from previous conditions. Ms. Rex also cites concerns with commercial use of the pier. The pier and boathouse are being permitted for private use only. Any sale or rental of mooring space by the owner would be a violation and subject to commission enforcement action. The issue raised by Ms. Rex of shoreline erosion is a concern of all waterfront owners, and boat traffic does contribute to it. However, this creek already has a number of piers and associated vessels, and free navigation along the waterways of Virginia is a right enjoyed by all citizens of Virginia. Therefore, this is a known hazard of purchasing waterfront property. Accordingly, after evaluating merits of the project against the concerns expressed by those in opposition to the project, and after considering all the factors contained in 28.2-1205 of the Code of Virginia, staff recommends that approval of the project as proposed. The applicant, Mr. Owens, is represented by Laura Morgan, who works for R&W Marine, and Ms. Rex does plan to address the commission as well with her concerns for the project. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions, members of the commission for Mr. Johnson? Hearing none. Ms. Laura Morgan, agent for the applicant, are you on board? Laura Morgan? If you're on, please make sure you unmute yourself on your computer.
Commissioner Bowman, this is Derek Owens. I'm on the line, and I of my request for the permit for pier replacement.
You broke up, sir. I could not hear you.
Commissioner Bowman, my name is Derek Owens, so I am on the line, and I can speak on behalf of the permit application.
All right, sir. Do you solemnly swear the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, sir.
Proceed, please, sir.
So, yes, sir. Mike has stated everything correctly and did a great job with the picture packet that he put in place. Ms. Rex has protested the replacement of the pier, which would be identical to what was already there. My contractors took out that pier by accident as they were demolishing the boathouse. They were supposed to leave from the boathouse out to the channelward side of the pier in place, but they didn't do that. So that when they took everything out, then I've got nothing left, and actually no way to get to the boathouse now at all. That is being constructed, and Mike's right. Construction's been halted until we can get a permit to replace the pier that was taken out by the contractors. So with that, Ms. Rex did request that we build a pier on the river side of the property, and Mike addressed those concerns. The only additional thing I would say is that a pier to get to water depth to moor sailboat would go all the way out to the channel on the riverside, and that would be an obstruction to boating traffic coming in and out of the creek if we were to consider putting a pier on that side of the property. So this was the best spot for all parties involved, and I respectfully ask the commission to consider my request. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Owens by members of the commission? Okay, they're seeing none. Is anyone else in support of this application? Is anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition to this application? I see Ms. Ann Rex is listed as a protestant. Ms. Rex, are you there?
I am here.
Yes, ma'am. Do you solemnly swear the testimony that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Could you proceed, please, ma'am?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank the board and the commissioners for their patience in advance. I don't have a lawyer, as do or exalted engineers, so I'm having to plead my own case. And in that respect, I invite you to make any kind of question me, clarify, etc. My first question is to Mike Johnson.
Ma'am, that's at this point, we would like for you to give your presentation to the commission. Then if you have any questions, I can then refer them to Mr. Johnson. But in this situation, I don't believe it appropriate that you cross Mr. Johnson this time.
I'm having trouble understanding the flow of everything. Okay. So basically, I am objecting to the Owens request to install a 180 by 5-foot pier and 10 by 12-foot pier head beside a 68 by 37-foot closed boathouse that has a 37-foot by 10-foot deck. This boathouse is currently under construction. My first question is, why is a pier of this magnitude needed in a residential setting on a small creek? Mr. Owens just said, and this was the first I learned of this, that he is going to have a sailboat. At the hearing to approve the boathouse, he said he needed a large boathouse like that because he was going to have a huge regular boat, motorboat, that would then fit in the boathouse. However, the boathouse is now outfitted with 2 boat lifts that would accommodate much smaller boats. So I'm wondering about the real necessity for having a pier. I mean, surely if he wants to have a pier, I think it's a great idea. I think he should put it, however, where he currently has a pier already. And you can see in Exhibit 1, do you members have copies? I guess you're looking at these on a screen. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am, we are.
All right, so Exhibit 1 is that first picture. It's a dock that exists right in front of his house on the river side of the property. It's not currently 148 feet, but it could be 148 feet. Question is, why would he need 148 feet? This is a residential area. It's a residential creek. This is not a commercial entity. So if he's afraid that enlarging that pier will take it too far out in the water, you know, a 50-foot pier, a 60-foot pier, that's plenty of pier, I would think, for most people in our creek. And in fact, there are no piers that are that length already in the creek. So my first question is, why is a pier of this magnitude needed? As it suggested, the creek would bring another 860 square feet of construction onto Free School Creek, 860 more square feet. And the boathouse alone has brought 3,000 and some square feet of construction into the creek. So I would suggest that he could expand the existing pier, that he does not necessarily, I don't see any reason he would need 148 feet. And that would shelter the wildlife on the creek side, as well as my property from pollution, noise, and erosion. And the boathouse, if you look at the second picture, the boathouse under construction now has these 2 long piers, each of which measures 68 feet, the length of the boathouse. That is plenty of dock space for just about anyone, it would seem. And it seems more than adequate for residential use. If I were to request a boathouse this size and a dock this size today, as a new construction, I think I would, clearly I would have to give a lot of substantiation for why that was needed. When VMRC approved the boathouse, I asked if they were guided by the principle of grandfathering in old structures. And Mr. Bowman said no, that the grandfathering principle was not the major principle guiding decisions. However, the board then voted to grandfather in the structure anyway. In fact, they made it bigger because prior to this, the deck on the back of the old boathouse was much smaller. It was, let me see, the deck on the old boathouse.
While you're looking up that, ma'am, I think the bottom line is that the word grandfather is a matter of semantics. We look at each individual case on its individual merits. And if a boathouse ends up in the same footprint, that does not necessarily mean it's grandfather. Grandfather, and I'm not a lawyer, means that by right, you have the authority to place a structure back in the same place it was, of the same size and same similar structures and characteristics. We do not grandfather boathouses or any other structures. They're all judged on the individual merits. So I just want to make clear of that.
So I guess it's just coincidental that you approved then a boathouse that conformed to one that was there before.
Ma'am, I would not say, and I'm not going to get in a debate with you on that, on our decision. The decision's been made, but I would not call anything that we do coincidental. I would call it a thoughtful debate amongst 9 members of the Marine Resources Commission appointed by the honorable governors that have seen fit to have these fine people on there. That's what I would call it, not coincidental.
House, and by approving a 37-foot wide by 10-foot deck on the back, that was larger than what was there before. Before was a 16-foot, a 5-foot, wait, it was not 37 feet wide. The deck that it replaced was not 37 feet wide. But my point is, that is a lot, that is the impact of that structure on our little creek is not necessarily a good thing. It brings in erosion, pollution, more boats, etc. The mission state for the Virginia Resource Marine Commission, at least part of it, as it's stated on your website, says that you serve as stewards of the Commonwealth's marine and aquatic resources, and that you protect its tidal waters and homelands for present and future generations. I appeal to VRMC to consider this second guiding principle as they evaluate this request. After all, if VMRC currently allows people to rebuild everything that was there before, it seems to me that it's negating its core reason for existence. Every structure built in a fragile creek setting has consequences. And one such consequence, and I'd like to show exhibit number 4, picture number 4 right now. Not that one. There should be, not those. Now, exhibit 4 shows the erosion on my property. Right here. Okay. So one consequence of changing structures and our building structures of huge size on a small creek and putting in living shorelines is increased erosion at neighboring properties. So these pictures show the increased erosion at the head of the peninsula where my property lies. In the past 3 years, Mr. Owens has built up a rock sill, a living shoreline, to unprecedented heights. It's an enormous crescent, and it has changed how the tides enter and travel through our little creek from the Severn River. The head of the peninsula of my property, which in the drawings that Mike Johnson submitted, you can see that my property is shaped like a peninsula. The head of the peninsula of my property has eroded significantly in just 3 years. At least 4 feet of shoreline has disappeared. Shoreline trees are falling as they succumb to increased wave action, undercutting their roots when daily tides enter the creek. I've lived here for 20 years, and I expect some change coastline. I mean, I've heard about global warming and subsidence, etc. But in the first 16 years, we had very minimal change, if any. However, in the last 4 years, since the rock sill was built up to supersize, built up, nourished, I was told it's been nourished, the amount of erosion on my property and trees, and you can see here, the undercutting from the tides has been affected. Maybe the supersized rock sill provides additional protection to Mr. Owens' property because his home was flooded during Hurricane Isabel, but it adversely affects mine. Adding effectively 160 feet of pier to the creek would attract boats, and increase traffic to the mix and would cause more erosion, more pollution, and noise. Exhibit number 3, if you could show that now, please. That's number 5. Exhibit, okay, this one. So this shows the proposed path of the 160-foot pier, as well as the boathouse under construction. The pier would come out all the way from the posts on the right to the 3 little posts on the left. So basically 160 feet out into the water from the shore. And when I say the footage, I'm factoring in the deck that is at the end, or the pierhead, as you call it. So these structures are commercial size structures, not residential size structures, and they exceed the size of any other boathouses, piers, etc. on our creek. In the hearing to approve the 68 by 37 foot boathouse plus deck, I shared concern that Owens might be planning to operate a commercial enterprise from his home. His brother operates a soft shell crab business from a garage nearby just down the road. And this still concerns me. I know he says he's not going to have a commercial operation, but what recourse would I have if this 160-foot pier is filled with crab pots, jet skis, and increased boat activity?
Ma'am, it'd be real simple. If that thing is converted to a commercial entity in violation of the permit would be revoked and he would be before the commission.
How would that be adjudicated? Would I call you? How would that work?
You could call me or you could call the Virginia Marine Police, either one.
The Virginia Marine Police, okay. So before the suggestion, the old pier that was there, Bob Lehman, the previous owner, lived in Manassas. He didn't live here. He docked his 50-foot sailboat on the old pier because the mast was too tall for the boathouse. He lived full-time in Manassas, and so having the long pier there did not affect the wildlife and tranquility in the creek. A commercial business has never operated there, and I would not have bought my house if it had. So I hope that it's true that there is no commercial enterprise here, but you can understand, no commercial enterprise planned, but you can understand my concern. So as you decide the matter, I think the solution is really quite simple. Approve, give him the one, if he wants a 160-foot pier, use the current one in front of his house that's on the big water, the big water, the Severn River, not a dock in this creek on Free School Creek. The compromise then would satisfy everybody. The Owenses would get their 160-foot pier. It would just be on the river. VMRC would fulfill its mission as a steward and protector of the Commonwealth's tidal waters and homelands. And the inhabitants of Free School Creek would get some relief from encroaching pollution, erosion, and noise. Thank you. That is my position, and I invite your questions and clarifications. There are a few other pictures. I'm sorry, could we go back to the pictures one moment? That picture. The picture you see here was taken in 2015 when Bob Lehman owned the property. So this is the old boathouse, and this is the old pier. You'll notice there is no 10 by 12 foot pier head on this pier. And furthermore, if you could you go back to the other picture, Mike, that shows, not that one. Let's see. This one, this picture, this is currently there lying in wait for the pier to be attached to. But those structures, when you look at this picture of the boathouse in 2015, those pilings are not there. There's this piling way out here, but the pilings that you see here were not there in 2015 before the changes were made to the property. Could we go back now to the pictures that show the sill? Okay. So this is a picture of the sill coming out from their property and making a huge crescent. And over here, you can see my gazebo, which was visible in the pictures that showed the erosion. And then back here, you can see my house. So what I want to point out here is that the tidal waters that come into the creek now that used to go straight back over the smaller sill, used to go back, now are hitting right the peninsula, right there of my property, the apex of the peninsula, and taking out trees, undercutting the shoreline, causing tons of erosion on my property. This is another close-up of the sill, and you can see that it's been nourished to a huge degree. Now, I'm not saying it's not pretty. What I'm saying is it's altering the way the water moves into the creek, and it's affecting the erosion on my property. And I'm saying that well aware that global warming exists, that subsidence is happening, but for 20 years, there has been no major erosion all along here, all along my entire property until now. And it's right here where the waters that are diverted by this sill come directly into my property. So the sill exists, it's been built. The boathouse, you have said yes on the boathouse. I'm hoping that you can satisfy everybody and save my property by saying yes on the boathouse, but putting it on the river side of the property. That's where a boathouse that's that long, a footprint of 160 square feet or whatever, belongs on the big river, not on this little creek. And I thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions of Rex by members of the commission? Seeing none, is there anyone else in opposition to this matter? Hearing none, Mr. Owens, you have 2 minutes to wrap up if you'd like to respond to anything you've heard.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Bowman. A couple of points here. Mr. Rex is making an argument that is not related to the pier, but about the sill that she's got in the photos. That was done many years before my wife and I bought the property, properly permitted. Mr. Rex has been given that information on when that work was done. My wife and I have done nothing to re-nourish the sill or change it in any way. In fact, nothing along any of the shoreline have we changed or altered in any way, including what Ms. Rex is showing in the photos. The other point about the length of the pier is just necessary to moor. We need water depth to moor the sailboat. So that's the reason for the length of the pier.
Okay. Any questions or follow-up for Mr. Owens before it goes before to the commission? Hearing none, the matter is before the commission for discussion and action.
Mr. James Minor, I move to approve staff recommendations.
Motion made by Mr. Minor to approve staff recommendations. Is there a second?
This is Dr. Neal. I'll second.
Second by Dr. Neal. Further discussion? Mr. France. Mr. France. Mr. Tankard.
Aye.
Mr. Zedrin.
Aye.
Mr. France, back with you. Dr. Neal.
Aye.
Mr. Minor.
Aye.
Ms. Lusk.
Aye.
Ms. Everett.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. France. Allison, can you see the microphone button, whether it's open, closed, or what's going on?
So it looks like Mr. France is not showing up on the panelist list anymore. I had a call-in user come up and I did unmute them, but they did not comment, so I don't think that was Mr. France.
Okay. All right. Regardless, the motion passes 7-0. If Mr. France decides to vote, oh no, we'll just disregard that unless he says that he heard the vote. You can check in, but regardless, at this time, the motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Also, we're going to take I know it's getting late in the day. We're going to take about a 10-minute break to give staff a benefit to have a break, and we will reconvene promptly at 2:45. 2:45. Thank you. I'd like to reconvene the October 27, 2020 meeting of the Marine Resources Commission. Before I go to the next item, I have a question for Mr. France. We had a roll call vote on the Derek Owens case, 20-1009, the boathouse case. Mr. France, are you with us?
I think he is still gone. He was having some power and internet issues, and he may not be able to join us for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, then for the record and for the official record, the count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 yeas, no nays, 1 absent, or 2 absent. Okay, and it will show that on the sheet that I turn in. So just want to make sure that we're good with that. Okay, next item on the agenda is Ballard Brothers Fish and Oyster Company, number 20-0141. And that would be Mr. Ben Stagg. Mr. Stagg, I understand you may have a different evaluation based on some discussions or whatever, or I'll let you explain it, but things may be just a little different.
Yes, sir. Everybody hear me okay?
We can, sir.
Okay. Yes, this is a joint permit application from Ballard Brothers Fish and Oyster Company Incorporated. The initial request was to place up to 1,050 floating oyster cages within an area of approximately 650 feet by 355 feet rectangle. This would be over their existing lease, 13637, which is in Cherrystone Creek in Northampton County. The request is protested by a nearby highland property owner, and the same person has the adjacent lease as well. My evaluation has changed quite a bit, so while you can follow along, the first page and a half or so is the same. A lot of things have happened on this one in the last 2 or 3 days and required some modification to the request. So with that, I'll get started. We did receive this application back at the end of January of this year. We did subject it to our normal public interest review, and we did receive a protest. We notified the adjacent property owners, and we did receive 1 protest from the owners of property that's in the name of Tidewater Realty and Security Corporation. Next slide. So the subject application is generally in the center of this slide. Lease number 16733 is shown there in the left center. Mill Creek, which we will talk about quite a bit, is that small creek that runs to the south of the lease, and the protestant's property is due east of that lease. Next slide. Here's an aerial photo of the area with the oysterbound leases shown. The little marsh icon represents the approximate location of the float application. You can see the SAV area is also shown to the south. Again, the protestant's property is the property to the east and to the north of Mill Creek, which is the small creek where the SAV runs into, and you can see a leak goes up into the upper part of Mill Creek. Next slide. So after doing the public interest review and notifying the adjacent property owners, we did receive a letter of objection from Judith O. Switston, who was listed as the Vice President of Tidewater Realty and Security Corporation back in March. In that letter, she noted the application appeared to reference an incorrect lease as the location of the project. Additionally, she indicated belief that the project as proposed may interfere with navigation to and from Mill Creek, a tributary to Cherrystone Creek. She also noted the area should remain in its current state for recreational use. Further noted that floating cages would create an eyesore to the immediately adjacent property owned by Tidewater Realty and Security Corporation, and could also create odor issues. She noted that Tidewater Realty and Security Corporation has been consistent in the past in objecting to similar activities in the creek. Subsequent to that, the applicant did submit some revised information to correct some of the errors in the original application. The original application, which is shown here, did not impact any SAV beds as proposed. Staff also understands that the applicant in the interim since March or since February has been in contact with Dr. Catherine Fulton, who is also a principal and owner of Tidewater Realty and Security Corporation property to the east concerning the proposal. We believe there's been ongoing negotiations between the applicant and Dr. Fulton, which may have resulted in a revised modification submitted in March that would move the application slightly to the west in an attempt to avoid impacts to Mill Creek. So in this picture, you can see the four corners depicted of the original application, and then a centroid in the center. At the southeasternmost icon there is what there is of a channel into Mill Creek. You can clearly see it's a slightly deeper area there, and that corner would be right at the edge of the somewhat minimal channel going in and out of Mill Creek. Next slide. This is the drawing that was also provided with the application, just depicting the rectangular area of the original January proposal. Next slide. This is just the coordinate values of that same box. Next slide. These are the other drawings submitted, typical layout for the proposed floating aquaculture structures. They would be anchored on the ends with screw type anchors. And as you can see, it'd be up to 15 rows. And next slide. This is a typical of just what the individual cages would look like. Again, tethered at each end with screw anchors and floating cages. Next slide. One more typical of the actual, what the system would look like. Again, the cage, of course, is underwater, the float system on the top. These are designed so they could be sunk if necessary, if needed for bad weather, but typically they would float on the surface, as you see here. Next slide. So the use of cages and floats, nets, and for shellfish propagation has resulted in increased public awareness concerning the use of public bottoms and highlighted the necessity for a comprehensive review of such requests related to aquaculture. Such requests in populated areas raised issues regarding public trust lands to include user conflicts, property values, aesthetics, navigation impacts, and suitable bottom types. Stewardship of public trust lands while weighing the public and private benefits versus detriments requires a multifaceted review of such permit requests. Staff does evaluate all protested applications on a case-by-case basis, considering all comments received concerning the area under request. So the total footprint of the original request was 1,650 by 355 feet, which would have been approximately 13.26 acres. Now the revision that was offered in February, well, in March, to address the channel area is shown here. It was moved slightly to the west, so that southeast corner again has now been moved slightly further to the west and has shifted the whole box that way. They also made the dimensions slightly different, now requesting an area of approximately 1,100 feet by 350 feet. Next slide. So this represents both the March modification request, and at the very end on the eastern side, you can see a dashed line which represents the original area that they requested, which was right on the edge of the channel as depicted in this drawing. So line AB, or A1B1, is the revised movement, shifting it slightly to the west. Next slide. This is again just the coordinate values of that revised area submitted in March. Next slide. This is a graphic representation of that same drawing that we created on our CAD maps with the map underlayment. Again, here you can see better the channel area going into Mill Creek. And in this drawing, it appears that the original submission would have actually put the corner kind of in the middle of the deepest area there. This does shift that corner to the edge of the channel. And then once you go north of that, it kind of deepens up in a wider area going through the area. In September, the applicants sent an additional set of drawings to Dr. Fulton, moving this area even further to the west, approximately 290 feet from the channel or from the original proposal from the eastern side. Staff was copied on this email, but the drawings were not officially submitted as a modification request. We believe this was an attempt by the applicant to address Dr. Fulton's concerns in hopes that by moving the site slightly more to the west would alleviate her concerns. So this revised area would have been 350 feet by 910 feet and would be about 7.31 acres. This also represents a further reduction in the size of the original request, and the number of floats was reduced down to 750. Dr. Fulton then contacted our office in October requesting some additional mapping information, and she was given actual maps of this area similar to this one and some other maps of the larger area. She requested that she get a map that showed the leases and all permitted aquaculture activity in the creek, which we did attempt to provide to her. We also received an additional email from her on October the 21st. That email is in your packet, and it's a good general summary of her position, to include that there had been a meeting scheduled between VMRC, the Army Corps of Engineers, the applicant, and Dr. Fulton earlier this year, but that never occurred because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting was canceled, and she continued to have concerns about the accuracy of the application documents, concerns about navigation, not just Mill Creek, Cherrystone Creek in general, possible adverse impacts to existing oyster resources, and questioned why this couldn't be relocated within the creek at a better location, not so close to her property that might impact her access. Staff spoke again with Dr. Fulton on Monday of this week, further discussed this application and the location of other floating aquaculture apparatus within the creek. Additionally, mapping information was again provided to Dr. Fulton on the same date to include the map location of the September proposal. Go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So this is a representation of the 290-foot shift that was presented to Dr. Fulton. We did see this in by copy of an email. Next slide. This is a graphic representation of that same area on a map that was provided to Dr. Fulton. Next slide. And this was a map sent to Dr. Fulton, the most recent map. She questioned where all the other floating permitted structures were. There is a permitted, authorized floating permit for the smaller rectangle you see there, which is north of the most recent September modification proffered to Dr. Fulton. And there are floats on that site. Dr. Fulton did send me pictures of those and wanted to know what was the permit number for that. I did give her that information. There seems to be an anomaly on our website that particular permit does not show up when you load that map and ask to see all the joint permit applications. I'm still investigating why that has occurred. But in any event, we did provide her with that information. Again, after speaking to her and providing this additional information, I did ask her of all the modifications that have been proffered, if the commission were to approve one, would this most recent one, which is further away from her property and further away from the channel out of Mill Creek, be preferable over any of the others? And she said yes, but she does continue to object to even this proposal. While the applicant has stated in the email to Dr. Fulton in September that this was their final proffer modification, and if not acceptable, they would seek a permit and might seek to lease permit the area they originally requested, they can speak to that issue when they speak. It should be noted that this request also requires an Army Corps of Engineers permit, and there was some confusion over the last 2 months, it appears, as to whether the Army Corps had authorized this or not. I did speak to the Army Corps of Engineers representative within the last week, and the Corps has not authorized this project yet. And further, they indicated that the original proposal and the initial March proposal, which just moved it slightly to the west, would likely not be acceptable because of the channel into Mill Creek, and that they preferred to see an alignment at least 100 feet west of that channel. This request, as you see on the screen, is 290 feet from the original proposal, or about 270 feet from the edge of the channel. The Corps representative also indicated that there had been a meeting set up, but it was canceled due to COVID, that he still wished to conduct an on-site meeting with both VMRC, the applicant, the protestants, but he was stymied because they were not, his supervisors were not allowing field visits to be conducted still during the COVID-19. So I don't know when that could be scheduled. So any approval by the commission today would still be subject to Army Corps of Engineers approval as well. And that will leave up to the Corps. I think that's the final slide. Next slide. Yes. So after careful review and consideration of the objections raised by the nearby property owner and the potential impacts of permitting this area for floating shellfish aquaculture, staff has concluded authorization of the most recently modified area as proffered to the protestant, but not yet officially submitted to the commission, appears appropriate and would potentially be acceptable by the Army Corps of Engineers. Accordingly, after considering all the factors of 28.2-1205A of the Code of Virginia, we recommend approval of this most recently proffered area, which would contain up to 750 float structures over state subaqueous bottomlands, as shown in the drawing in the PowerPoint presentation that was proffered to the protestant in September of this year, which was within lease number 13637 in Cherrystone Creek in Northampton County. Should the commission approve this drawings submission, we would want drawings submitted to the commission confirming this is the alignment they're requesting so they can be attached to the permit. We'd also recommend a annual royalty, $1,592.50 for encroachment over 318,500 feet, of subaqueous bottomlands at a rate of 0.005 cents a foot, so half a cent per square foot. I'd be happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions for Mr. Stagg by members of the commission? Well, I guess my only observation would be that this has gone back and forth a number of times, and there's been due diligence on, I think, all parts to try to come to some resolution on the matter, but we never know until the end of the hearing. But it does appear that, unlike some cases that we have where people just dig their feet in and, you know, one side says, go away, I'm going to do this. The other side says, go away, I'm going to do that. And I don't think this has been the case. So before it's even over with, I applaud all involved to make sure, to indicate my appreciation and trying to come to some resolution. So again, any questions of Mr. Stagg? Thank you, Ben. Applicant present or represented is Tim Rapine on board, or Rapine, I'm sorry.
Mr. Commissioner, this is Kim Husky, Terrystone Aquafarms.
Yes, Ms. Husky, will you be presenting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, will you do me a favor? Do you solemnly swear the testimony that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, proceed, please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, members of the commission. We support staff's recommendation to decrease the width of the application, but would at this time request an additional 150 linear feet inshore over our existing lease. And that would be, sir, to compensate for the decrease in width as the site was moved to the west. We have made numerous attempts since March, as Mr. Stagg has stated, to compromise with the protestant and have been unsuccessful. Terrystone has been operating in this area for decades. We have a lot of experience in this creek and understand it better than anyone. We have selected this site very carefully with a lot of research and thought going into it. The application is bound by SAV to the southwest, Mill Creek Channel to the northeast, and deep water of Cherrystone Creek to the north. There is literally nowhere else this application could go. As stated with navigation concerns, navigation will not be impeded by this modified application. The area is too shallow and power boats would not be operating in this area anyway. Kayakers are able to traverse inside of the floating cages if they wish to paddle, if they do not wish to paddle 300 yards around them. Floating cages, I'm sorry, Mr. Stagg, would you put up slide number 4 of our presentation? Thank you. As you can see, members of the commission, floating cages do not have to be considered an eyesore or ugly. As you can see from our picture of a similar area with a similar view, they are not at all objectionable. So in closing, we say we support the staff recommendation with the addition of 150 linear feet inshore over our current lease. Thank you again for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions by members of the commission for Ms. Husky? Okay. I do have, just to make sure that I get it right in this day of Zoom and WebEx, I do have two other people that are indicating support. One was Tim Rapine, and the other is John Psalm III that signed up. I just want to make sure that if they want to speak, they're afforded an opportunity. If there is silence, I will presume that Ms. Husky has handled the matter, and we will move along. Mr. Rapine or Mr. Psalm? All right. Yes. Hello?
This is Tim Rapine.
Yes, Mr. Rapine, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I'd like to preserve my time for rebuttal if necessary.
Okay, that'll be fine. I will swear you in that time if need arises. Mr. Psalm? Okay. Is anyone else here in support of this application that wishes to be heard? Is there anyone in opposition that wishes to be heard? I haven't been informed that a gentleman by the name of Reed Mayo, attorney, wishes to represent both Catherine Fulton and Judith Swiston. If I'm wrong, then I can get corrected. It won't be the first time for sure, but is Mr. Reed Mayo on the phone?
I am, Mr. Commissioner. Can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Mayo. I'm not familiar with you. Are you an attorney licensed to practice in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
I am, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, sir. I will not swear you. Please proceed.
And I don't intend to give any evidence, just commentary on the materials previously presented to this commission. And again, thank you for allowing me to speak. As you indicated, I represent the company that owns some adjacent property, Tidewater Realty and Security, and their concern all along has been about navigation and the navigability of Mill Creek all the way out to Cherrystone Creek and then of course into the bay. So it's not just merely out of Mill Creek, but also the full ability to access the bay from that same area and their property. To Ballard's credit, as has been indicated, they have been working with Tidewater. Tidewater has been working with them through the offices of Dr. Fulton to see if they can reach some sort of accommodation. And unfortunately, because of COVID, a lot of information has not been available until very recently, as Mr. Stagg indicated. One of the concerns Tidewater had was the presence or the creation of additional floating cages in relation to existing floating cages and whether that would in fact create navigational issues. One of the slides, I think the penultimate slide that Mr. Stagg presented to the commission actually shows a pretty tight proximity of the proposed floating cage area with an existing floating cage area. I suspect when that's examined a little more carefully, there's actually a little more distance in there, but that's the type of concern Tidewater had. As I understand the recommendation of Mr. Stagg and the VMRC, as supported by Ms. Husky, there's I'm going to refer to it as the third revision dated September 18, 2020 is the one that's currently under consideration. From Tidewater's perspective, that appears to be acceptable. And as Mr. Stagg indicated, there was to be a sort of a site visit, if you will, with VMRC, Army Corps, the applicant, and Dr. Fulton, so they could all get their heads together and make sure that this process and this project was going to work. And unfortunately, that got canceled. So that's our only caveat is it looks like this Revision 3 proposal will work, solves all of Tidewater's concerns, but it doesn't know because it doesn't have that expertise. And as Mr. Stagg mentioned, some of this material was provided only as recently as last Friday or Monday. So with that in mind, we reserve our objection, but we understand that Ballard needs to move forward. We don't wish to unduly impede their ability to get this project moving. And so we'll just shut up and sit down at that point.
All right, so let me ask you a question just to make sure that I have the process correct. Have you and your clients have seen the map that's proposed at this juncture or have not?
We have. This was the September 18, 2020, what I referred to as Revision 3 or the third rev. Unfortunately, it was sent, I think, to by email. It wasn't mailed, and it wasn't mailed to the president or the registered agent. So it actually was attached to an email that wasn't looked at more carefully until we got into October. So the short answer is yes, Mr. Commissioner. We have reviewed it. We've studied it as best we can determine it is acceptable. But again, we don't have the expertise and haven't had the ability to get smarter eyes on it than ours.
Right, because that's what we have before us at the present time that we're looking at. I just want to make sure that we weren't going to go down the road and approve something that was speculative in nature. And one might argue that still it might be, but at the same time, we do have something on paper that that the commission can make an informed decision when they cast their vote. So that was just my major concern, Mr. Mayor. But I thank you. Mr. Mayo, do either one of your clients wish to speak, or is that it for the objection on behalf of the protestants?
No, Mr. Commissioner, that is it on behalf of the protestants.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in opposition to this project that wishes to be heard? Well, after a contentious day, this matter goes before the commission. So, matters before the commission for discussion and action.
Zedrin, I move we approve staff recommendation.
Motion made by Mr. Zedrin to approve staff recommendations. Is there a second?
So moved, Ed Tankard.
Second by Mr. Tankard. Any further discussion on the motion?
Commissioner, this is Ben Stagg.
Yes, Ben.
I understand what the motion is, but the applicant did ask to modify their request for an additional 150 feet in box C. So I just want to remind the commissioners that they did ask for that. They certainly don't have to change the motion.
Is that different than what I'm looking at on the screen right now?
Yes, I have a drawing that would reflect what they just asked for.
Okay, can you put the drawing up?
Yep.
So that
Just go to the next slide, Mike.
I want to make sure Mr. Mayo sees and what he sees and
Next one. Keep going. Keep going. One more. Okay, so this is the drawing, and I'll explain this so you understand it. So based on what they just asked for, the box at the top slide, the top drawing with the 4 icons, is the area of the most recent revision in September. If you add 150 feet to that box, that would be the smaller rectangle to the south. Those distances show the distance offshore, and the reason for those is there is SAV along the shoreline, but the bottom drawing, I could not combine these together because the mapping system is 2 different maps, but I put distances on the SAV map that are generally in the same location as the 3 distances on the aerial map. And you can see that the box, if they extend in another 150 feet inshore, would still be offshore of all of the current SAV bed. Now, that's 2018. I did look at the composite, 2014 through 18 plus 2019. And 2018 is the year that SAV extended the farthest offshore of any of those years. So this is the worst case or best case scenario for SAV. And this box would not encroach into any of that shown SAV bed or any of the last 5 running years. I believe, and you may want to ask the applicant, if this represents, I believe, what they just requested, which was an additional 150 feet inshore. If you wish to consider this, this would obviously change the footprint. And if you want to know what that is, I've calculated that as well. This would be a 500 by 110 foot area based on those coordinates, which would be about 10.44 acres, which would be 455,000 square feet, which would result in a royalty, if approved in this configuration, of $2,275 annually at 0.5 cents per square foot. And I'd be happy for the applicant to clarify if this matches what they're requesting.
Well, I want to make sure before you ask the applicant, since this has come in now and I thought things are running down the track smoothly, which doesn't mean they aren't. This does not in any way, and I think the answer is this does not in any way impede or come close to impeding the navigation that the protestant was concerned about. Is that correct?
I believe that to be correct because this is even shallower here, this additional area, and it's still considerably 250 feet plus west of the Mill Creek Channel, and none of this is in the deeper area of Cherrystone Creek.
And furthermore, it avoids, to the best extent practicable, the SAV, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, this is from a parliamentary procedure a little challenging, but I'll go and I'll try to do the best. And Block, if I get off, let me know, because we do have a motion. I don't know that this motion that's on the table is an acceptable motion at this time unless we go back to it. The bottom line is, Ms. Husky, in looking at what has been now presented to us in the last 15 minutes, does this actually represent what you're asking for?
Yes, sir, Mr. Commissioner. We applaud Mr. Stagg's effort to put that last-minute slide together. We apologize for adding this on so quickly this morning, but it does very accurately describes what we're asking for, and we thank you again.
You're most welcome. Mr. Mayo, the question is now in your corner looking at this, and I don't know if your clients are with you, but is this satisfactory to your clients at this juncture?
Mr. Commissioner, we, in the modern world of technology, I got a text message with a thumbs up. So we have no objection to the additional 150 shoreward feet. I think in fact, I've got a line drawing diagram showing the navigation around the north edge of the original box. So we are not affected adversely. The interests we are concerned about are not affected adversely. So we have no objection to it.
Boy, I like it when a plan comes together. At this time, I'm going to call the roll. Mr. France?
Whoa. I have a question here.
Whoa, okay. All right. Well, all right. Wait. Whoa. Okay. All right.
All right. We have a motion to accept staff recommendations. So now I'm asking staff, what is their recommendation? You know, we know what the applicants asked for. We know that the protestant says that's okay. But we have not heard staff has changed their recommendation.
Right. Commissioner Bum, if I could real quick, I think, I don't remember who made the motion, but I think whoever made the motion was going based on what we understood the recommendation to be at the time, which I don't think included this.
Okay, well, then let's start over again. This would be item number 10. Ballard.
Mr. Commissioner, John Ziegler, I made that motion, but I think what we need to do is hear what staff recommendation is.
That's what I'm going to do, sir, as I write out this sheet one more time, since I had to throw the other one away. Okay. I will call on the appropriate person in just a second. Now, Mr. Stagg, you have presented to us modified maps of, I guess, third or fourth generation that resulted from an application by Ballard Brothers Fish and Oyster Company Incorporated pertaining to cages within Cherrystone Creek in Northampton County. Since we're going through this virtually, I'm going to refer to the picture that's currently up on the screen at the time of, I have 3:22 p.m. on October 27, 2020, which depicts two pictures. One, which is obviously an aerial that has cages on it with numbers 412, 462, and 475 listed thereon. The picture to the bottom says SAV 2018 with 3 lines marked in yellow, top and bottom with red at 380 feet, 460 feet, and 445 feet, with the number at the bottom, VMRC 2020-0141. It's about the best I can describe the exhibit that we have in front of us without initialing my computer screen. I'm asking you at this point, is this staff's recommendation pursuant to the application that has been presented to the commission?
I'd like to say yes quickly, but I do want to explain how we got here. So staff's original recommendation was the previous slide that showed just this larger box at the top that you see now, because at the time, that was all we were dealing with. This request to add 150 feet, while I was aware of it, was not officially presented to the commission yet. So I made this drawing knowing that the applicant was going to probably request this at the hearing. So this represents what they have requested. And you're right, there's two drawings here. The distances show the distance offshore to the expanded 150-foot request, and the second drawing just shows the distance to the SAV, showing that this box does not encroach into the SAV. To answer your question, staff is comfortable with still recommending approval of this expanded area with the increased square footage and the amended royalty amount that I quoted earlier of $2,275 annually based on 455,000 square feet, provided the applicant provides us with a new revised modified drawing similar to the plan drawings you saw previously that reflects this alignment, and we would recommend approval of that.
Dr. Neal, does that adequately satisfy the question that you proffered, or would you like further?
Yes, so the first time I hear staff recommends approval of that extra line, that extra little rectangle.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that modifies staff's recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Zedrin here.
Mr. Zedrin.
So my motion now is that, to clarify my motion, is that I hereby move to approve staff's amended recommendation in accordance with the picture that we're seeing right here.
All right, sir. Is there a second to that motion?
Christy Everett was second.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. Further comments, questions? I'll call the roll. Mr. France? Mr. Tankard?
Aye.
Mr. Zedrin?
Aye.
Dr. Neal?
Aye.
Mr. Minor? Mr. Minor? Ms. Lusk?
Aye.
Ms. Everett?
Aye.
Right. Chair votes aye. Recalling Mr. Minor. Does staff have him on the line still, or any report?
I am not seeing Mr. Minor on the line.
All right. Motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 yeas and 3 absent. Motion passes. Thank you all very much. Greatly appreciated. Mr. Mayo, it's good to have you before the commission. You're always welcome. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Next item on the agenda is public hearing, or not public hearing, public comment. Same thing, but not quite different. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard on matters that are not on the agenda. Present time, if staff would open up the mic to see if anybody wishes to be heard. See something down in the chat block. Okay. Anyone wish to be heard on public comments? If not, we will be going to item number 12, public hearing, proposal to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-27010 pertaining to the blue crab fishery to extend the season for hard crab pot fishery through December 9th, 2020. Mr. Gear, is it you?
That's going to be Alexa for the presentation.
Alexa, good afternoon. What'd you do, give the boss the day off?
He comes up next. We're still making him work.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead. Proceed, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner and members of the Commission.
This is a public hearing on a proposal to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-270 pertaining to blue crab fishery to extend the season for the hard crab pot fishery through December 19th, 2020. Next slide, please. At the May 21st Crab Management Advisory Committee meeting, staff recommended status quo measures based on the results of the winter dredge survey, which had a decrease in crab abundance, mostly in the juvenile population, but a low harvest rate. CMAC voted unanimously to recommend status quo with the option to revisit that recommendation in the fall once effects of COVID on the fishery could be ascertained. On June 23rd, the Commission voted to approve those status quo measures for 2020 and 2021. On October 5th, CMAC met again and voted unanimously to recommend extending the season through December 19th at the April to November bushel limit rather than the lower March bushel limit. Next slide, please. The reasoning for CMAC's request is the effect of COVID-19 on the blue crab market and harvesters. Some crabbers did report not being able to sell crabs once the restaurants were ordered closed. However, even this late in the year, it's difficult to determine if COVID-19 actually affected harvest. This table shows preliminary harvest for 2019 and 2020 as reported to the VMRC by the end of September in each year. You can see the preliminary harvest in March 2020 is double that of March 2019, but April 2020 is less than half that in 2019. However, reporting does play a key role in this. 220 to 330 licensees have not reported so far in each month of 2020. This is 100 to 150 fewer licensees reporting than had reported by this time last year. Next slide. Since 2009, the crab pot season has only extended into December 3 times, until December 15th in 2012 and 2013, and December 20th in 2016. CMAC's recommendation was to match the 2016 closure date of December 20th. However, December 20th of this year is a Sunday when crab potting is not allowed, so the committee recommended December 19th instead. Next slide. From these 3 years with December harvest, we have some idea of what a December season could look like. The graph on the left shows how many harvesters were active in each month from 2012 to 2018. Every November, whether there was a December season or not, had 200 to 300 active crab potters. In 2012, 2013, and 2016, fewer than 75 crabbers were active. The graph on the right shows how average daily harvest decreases in November and December. In each year, there is less harvest in late November than in early November, and harvest in December is even less than that. Next slide. So in December of those 3 years, the daily number of trips was an average of 14 trips per day, and in the highest year, an average of 20 trips per day. The daily harvest from 2012, 2013, and 2016 was around 5,000 pounds per day, and in the highest year, 2012, it was around 9,200 pounds per day. So if we take those average daily harvests over the 19 days proposed for 2020, using the average, we could estimate 95,000 pounds of harvest, which is about 0.35% of 2019's harvest. And if we use the highest year, December, this 2020 could harvest up to 175,000 pounds, which would be 0.65% of a 2019 harvest. Next slide. Now to go through the regulation 270. In section 30, subsection C, we just add December to the lawful time period, daily time period. Next slide. In section 40, we amend the season limits. Section A has the time the season may be open, the lawful season, and subsection C lists the dates within which hard crab pots cannot be placed in the tidal waters of Virginia. Next slide. In section 51, we amend the date within which daily bushel limits are active. So as mentioned earlier, the December bushel limits would match the April through November bushel limits rather than the lower March bushel limits. Next slide. In section 55, we extend the season for size limits for peeler crabs. Next slide. Staff recommends amending Chapter 4 VAC 20-270 pertaining to blue crab fishery. Sorry, I have to amend that. To extend the season for the hard crab pot fishery through December 19th, 2020. I will mention this recommendation only extends the season for hard crab pots. Peeler pots and all other crabbing gears will be held to their currently established closure dates. In July, the Commission set the seasons for 2020 and 2021. This change only affects the 2020 season. The 2021 season will still be in regulation as ending November 30th, so this will be reviewed as usual in July 2021. At this time, staff has received no public comments outside those made at the CMAC meeting. And one comment of note at this meeting was from Ron Lipschitz of VIMS and the Winter Dredge Survey, who stated that extending the season this year was reasonable given the low daily harvest rates in December, and that the 2020 survey showed adult crabs to still be above average abundance. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Alexa? I guess I have one, Alexa. We're extending the crab season to a Saturday. Are they planning on getting their pots up the same day on Saturday that they fished the last day? Or is that pot going to be overboard on a Sunday, which is normally not a traditional day, which is also a prohibited day for commercial crabbing? And when are they planning on getting the pots out of the water?
The pots will have to be out of the water on that Saturday because we'll have to be taken out of the water at the latest that Saturday, because the amended subsection C says it shall be unlawful to place, set, fish, or leave any commercial gear in that time.
I thought so, but it went by kind of fast. I thought I caught that in yellow, but I just wanted to make sure. Well, here's the only thing I'll say is, I don't mean to sound tyrannical or whatever, but we're extending the season, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from it, and Dr. Lipschitz thinks it's a good idea. I would expect law enforcement not to be very, very lenient come the middle of that following week if those crab pots are overboard. And I don't know how we get that word out, but we're holding our word and being reasonable and scientifically reasonable in what we're doing. But I don't expect a whole lot of ghost pots in the water at Christmas time. That's not going to work, and it just can't happen, because if it does, if I'm around, I'm not as likely to be as understanding and reasonable as I am this year. And I mean that only from a resource protection perspective, and that's all. That's all it comes from. So I don't know how we get the word out, but that's going to be a hard and fast day right there. And while we've normally been very, very reasonable as far as, you know, working on Sundays to get crab pots out during storms and things like that, this one here is one that comes with some responsibility on the crabbers' parts to make sure they definitely do the right thing. So that's the end of my sermons for the day, I can assure you. So anyone else have any comments? Questions of Alexa? This is a public hearing. Is anyone in the audience in favor or against this issue? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
James Minor, I move that we approve staff recommendation.
Motion made by Mr. Minor to approve. Is there a second?
So moved, Ed Tankard.
Mr. Tankard, thank you, sir. Mr. France, back with us? Mr. Tankard?
Aye.
Mr. Zedrin?
Aye.
Dr. Neal?
Aye.
Mr. Minor?
Aye.
Ms. Lusk?
Aye.
Ms. Everett? Ms. Everett?
Sorry, I'm unmuting. Aye.
That's okay. I know how long the day has been. Motion passes. Thank you very much. At this time, we have Mr. Pat Gear, who wants to give us a very brief, since I have a conference call with my boss here in about 20 minutes, rundown.
I knew that was coming to be very brief. Thank you, Commissioner.
Look,
Thank you, Commissioner.
I didn't set the schedule on that one, believe me.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Everybody
sir.
can hear me? All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner and Associate Commissioners. I'm going to make this very brief, and we've had a very light agenda in fisheries in the commission meetings recently, and I just want to let you know that's going to be picking up a little bit. We have coming up in December, we're going to have a public hearing on an action to reduce recreational cobia harvest by 40% for the 2021 through the 2023 fishing seasons. And this is due to a payback of overage Virginia has for, we've had an overage for recent years from 2017 through 2019. This is part of Amendment 1 of ASMFC's Cobia Fisheries Management Plan that develops harvest specifications each year, and the state is awarded a portion of that harvest. Our annual recreational quota is 39.4% of the total coastwide recreational quota, or 29,039 fish annually. Now, we've gone over that. Our average for the last 3 years has been 50,354 fish. So that's the reason for the 40% reduction we have to come up with. We met with our Finfish Management Advisory Committee on October 14th, took to them a lot of options and asked them to whittle it down to a reasonable amount, and they did that. They came up with 5 options that include a series of season and/or vessel limit reductions. We're taking that out for public comment. We have a survey online that people can answer. And at the commission meeting in December, we'll have FMAX comments, staff recommendations, and the results of those public comments for at the December meeting to vote on for final approval. The second item we have is concerning Menhaden. Now that the commission has administrative authority for Menhaden, we need to adjust regulations on a regular basis to account for changing harvest specifications, just like we do for black sea bass and summer flounder. At last week's ASMFC meeting, the Menhaden board adopted a new total allowable catch for the 2021-2022 season of 194,400 metric tons. That represents a 10% reduction of the previous TAC. The decrease was not because of concerns with the status of the stock, but more to incorporate ecological reference points, which have been included in the management scheme to account for Menhaden's importance as a food source for apex predators such as striped bass. Virginia's TAC will remain at 78.66%, roughly 151,392 metric tons. We'll meet with our Menhaden Manager and Advisory Committee either in November or December, and the proposed changes will come before the commission in probably December. We're hoping December may have to be pushed until January. And finally, on to croaker and spot. The recreational commercial harvest of both these species has been down in recent years. ASMFC manages these species through what's called a traffic light analysis, or TLA, which has trigger designations when which look at specific management actions when those triggers are exceeded. Those triggers have been exceeded for croaker for the last 6 years, and for spot for 2 of the last 3 years. So we have to take action, and those actions are going to start in 2021. And it will be establishing recreational possession limit for each species not to exceed 50 fish per day, and a reduction in the commercial harvest of at least 1%. We can be more conservative if we want to, but that's the minimum we have to do. Staff will meet with the the FMAC and its spot croaker work group to develop the management actions. We have to develop regulations. We don't have any regulations on these species at this point, and this will come before the commission in early April. And finally, I just want to acknowledge the staff, the hard work they've been doing, working remotely, getting everything done. And in addition, the work they've been doing on the disaster relief applications and for the CARES Act. We've been going through this. Deputy Commissioner Boland mentioned it last month, and our application period is open. And we received over 500 applications so far, which is about 25% of the folks that are qualified in round one. The application period is set to close this Friday, and we're hoping we get a flood of applications and online applications mail-in before the deadline. And that's about all I have. I just wanted to go through that quickly, and if there's any questions, I'll take them at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Gear? Well, I just want to remind you that our next commission meeting is on December the 8th. I won't be talking with you over Thanksgiving. I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday and stay safe as well. I just thank you for your dedication, your hard work, and your support. We try to do the best we possibly can. And a lot of times there's some moving targets involved, and I've got a great staff that does a great job putting on what you saw today. Normally, when we're in a commission meeting room, you know how many people are involved, and today, really, I think we had a total of 3 running this whole program. So I got a good team there, and I really appreciate their hard work. So with that, I bid you adieu, and wish you a happy Thanksgiving when it comes, as they say in Jamaica. And also, if you need me, do not hesitate to call. God bless. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too.